Chapter 773.in June Moxie's Dantian. The new purple chi was becoming denser and denser. As time passed, it gradually formed a special whirlpool and began to rotate slowly. As it rotated, the purple chi in the Hongjun Pagoda seemed to have found its target and began to rapidly pour into June Moxie's body. The whirlpool in his Dantian also sped up from slow to fast and gradually formed a whistling sound similar to that of wind and thunder. It was clearly emitted from his body and was accompanied by the rumbling of wind and thunder. It was a breathtaking sound. At the moment when the whirlpool reached its peak, there was a sudden loud bang, and June Moxie's Dantian exploded. With this loud bang, the purple chi in his Dantian instantly disappeared. Everything was quiet. It was like a deathly stillness. June Moxie couldn't help but be alarmed. If my Dantian is empty, won't I lose all my power? You don't have to play with me like this, right? He hurriedly tried to mobilize the power in his meridians to investigate, but found that there was no movement in his Dantian. He then looked inside his Dantian and saw that it was empty. There was only a large amount of gray fog, which filled his Dantian, but it was motionless and difficult to mobilize. The original spiritual power had disappeared without a trace, and in the middle of that strange gray fog, there was a little bit of light. This little bit was only the size of a speck of dust and emitted a faint light. If one didn't examine it carefully, they wouldn't even be able to find it. It was like the vast night sky was full of fog, and there was only a small shining star in the distance. The tiny nascent soul and the enormous flow of spiritual force that could be commanded like an arm and a finger were all gone. What is this? I made a breakthrough, so why did I lose all my power? Even if it's the so-called break and then build, degenerate and then succeed, it shouldn't be like this. While June Moxie was wondering about the various changes that had taken place in his body, his mind suddenly tumbled, as if tens of thousands of rays of light had suddenly shone out from the gray clouds, and a few lines of words rolled out. The meaning of the words was obscure and simple, and directly reflected into the lake of his heart. Jun Dashao was no stranger to this, as he had experienced something similar before. This was definitely the mantra for the fifth layer of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. The beginning of primordial chaos, the secret of heaven and earth, endless life, unchanging since ancient times, heaven as heaven, earth as earth, life as continuation, death as continuation, exquisite 9 revolutions, the will of creation, 9 deaths of the soul, the silence of chaos. June Moxie inexplicably had an epiphany. It seemed that from now on, he could be considered to have truly stepped into the door of the unlocking heaven's fortune. The 5th level was the beginning of the journey. The art of unlocking heaven's fortune was not just a simple cultivation technique or battle technique. Its essence should be in the word's creation of heaven and earth. And right now, his own cultivation technique was in the legendary state of chaos before the heaven and earth. Everything was still. Just like the chaotic gas in his Dantian, it was motionless, and only when it truly moved, then slowly evolved until it could emit the first ray of light, rising and falling, forming the embryonic form of heaven and earth. This was the beginning of the creation of heaven. After that was the so-called evolution of the sun, moon, and stars, the process of creation of all living things. That was the so-called creation. All of this was the evolution process of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. Only in this way could it be considered as the true creation of heaven's fortune. And the 5th layer that he was in, to put it nicely, was the beginning of the creation of heaven's fortune. In the end, it was in the beginning. Of course, it was also the most crucial level. Only with this level as the starting point would there be the subsequent process of creation. As for the previous 4 levels, at best, they were only for laying the foundation. June Moxie laughed bitterly, once again trying to mobilize the energy in his body. But he discovered that in his meridians, the vigorous energy in the past had completely disappeared. There was no way to mobilize it. The only thing left was a faintly discernible strand of purple chi. And this faintly discernible strand of purple chi was completely unfathomable. There was no way to assess its strength. In fact, Jun Moxie did not even know whether he had improved or regressed in terms of cultivation. Had he obtained everything, or had he lost everything? Just like that, Jun Mo Xie slowly walked up to the 5th floor of the Hongjun Pagoda. From simplicity to extravagance was easy, but from extravagance back to simplicity was difficult. Jun Daxiao, who was used to flying in the sky and burrowing into the earth, suddenly reverted back to being able to walk on his feet, was really not used to it. The interior of the 5th level of the Hongjun Pagoda gave Jun Moxie a very strange feeling. This 5th level was like a small stone room, narrow and low. But when he thought about it this way, he suddenly felt that this small 5th level was clearly like a boundless void, vast and indistinct, completely unfathomable. These two feelings were polar opposites, simply contradictory to the extreme. But these two feelings were real. Which one is the real one? Which one is fake? This question suddenly popped up in Jun Moxie's mind. These two feelings, which one is real? Which one is fake? And just as this thought popped up in his mind, he suddenly stopped moving forward. It was not that he did not want to move forward, but he was forced to stop. It felt as if there was a solid wall in front of him, and he could not take another step forward. But in front of his eyes, there was clearly a void in front of him. This question seemed to be asked by Jun Moxie in his heart, but it also seemed like the Hongjun Pagoda was asking him. But there was one thing that Jun Moxie was very clear about. If he could not answer this question, he could forget about entering this place, not even a step forward. Real? Fake? Jun Moxie closed his eyes and pondered silently. After a long time, he slowly opened them and said lightly, "What is real? What is fake? Real and fake, it's all in my heart. If I say it's real, then it's real. Even if it's fake, it's still real. On the other hand, if I say it's fake, then it's fake. Even if it's not fake, it's still fake. Whether it's real or fake, it's just a thought in my heart. Only one thing is real. I am the owner of this place, and only I am real." After saying that, he took a step forward. It was as if he had completely forgotten about the invisible barrier in front of him. But after taking the step, he actually entered easily and effortlessly the 5th level of the Hongjun Pagoda. In the originally empty space, a small table suddenly appeared out of thin air. On the table was a book. It suddenly appeared in front of Jun Moxie. Just as Jun Moxie was about to step forward to see what was going on, an indescribable feeling suddenly arose in his heart. He stopped in his tracks and just stood there quietly. In front of him, 2 rows of golden words slowly appeared in the void. Do you want to use kindness to create creation? Do you want to use slaughter to split open the sky? 2 choices again. Will you use kindness to cultivate the path of creation? Or will you use slaughter to face the common people and bathe the heavens with blood? Jun Mo Xie silently thought for a moment. Then, he suddenly laughed involuntarily. What is evil? Before the Hongmeng derivation, how could there be any difference between good and evil? These 2 choices are obviously nonsense. I've never thought of myself as a kind person, but I'm also not a so-called demon. I may not be a good person, but I'm definitely not a bad person. I'm free to repay kindness and hatred, and I have a clear conscience. When has kindness ever been far from me? When has slaughter entered the human world? I use my eyes to see creation. I use my heart to split open the sky. The answer was the same, idealism. As soon as these 4 sentences were spoken, the 2 rows of golden words suddenly disappeared. Even the small table disappeared in an instant. Only the book remained. It suddenly floated in the void, but in an instant, it turned into a majestic golden light and entered between Jun Moxie's eyebrows. There is nothing in the universe. One origin begins anew, 9 paths return. Today's birth is the end. Today's existence is eternity. Chaos Formation Solution. This was the title of the book. Following that, diagram after diagram of the formation slowly flowed through Jun Moxie's mind. Like a clear stream, everything could be seen at a glance, and the bottom could be seen. The boundless origin formation, the yin and yang dim light formation, the three light derivation formation, the four symbols all heaven formation, the five elements destruction formation, the six heavenly circles formation, the seven stars heaven formation, the eight extremes life and death formation, the nine palaces formation, the 10 direction destruction formation. There were actually hundreds and thousands of formations of various sizes. Some were for life, some for death, some for slaughter, and some for defense. There were many types and endless variations. Jun Moxie let out a long breath. These formation diagrams would undoubtedly be a great asset for him to protect his life in the future. Although he hadn't obtained any specific skills yet, he had gained a lot of enlightenment. As long as these formations were set up properly, they would be the best guarantee for the safety of his family. For Jun Moxie, these are the most practical things he needed at his current stage. With these formations, he was even happier than giving Jun Moxie dozens of special skills. Ever since Jun Moxie entered the Hongjun Pagoda, Mei Shuyan had been in a meditative state outside. Although the weather inside the Hongjun Pagoda was pleasant, there was no difference between day and night. The people inside did not know how much time had passed since they entered the meditative state. In any case, Jun Moxie still had no intention of coming out. On the other side, when Mei Shuyan woke up from her cultivation, she realized that Jun Moxie had not come out. However, she wasn't anxious. Secluded cultivation was a long and drawn-out cultivation. It would be abnormal for someone like Jun Dashao to break through in just 3 to 7 days. Mei Shuyan looked at the results of her cultivation and felt that she had made great progress. Thus, she entered the meditative state again. When she woke up, she had already repeated the process 9 times. At this moment, her small body was completely covered by a thick white fog. Mei Shuyan was pleasantly surprised to realize that her cultivation was advancing bit by bit. She felt as though she could count it with her fingers. Chapter 774. The dense spiritual qi that had enveloped Mei Shuyan's small body had all disappeared. She had absorbed all of it into her own body and turned it into her own energy. The surrounding spiritual qi had also stopped surging towards her. Her cultivation had reached a bottleneck. She had to stabilize and refine it before she could break through to the next stage of cultivation. However, this speed of improvement had already caused Mei Shuyan to be pleasantly surprised. This cultivation speed was simply too fast. Although there was no sun or moon in the Hongjun Pagoda, Mei Shuyan could still tell that she wouldn't be cultivating for a long time. At most, it would only be 3 to 5 days. But in just a few days, she had risen from a non-ranked Xian beast to the peak of level 3. This speed was too terrifying. Although this was clearly happening to her, Mei Shuyan still felt like she was dreaming from time to time. It was too wonderful. Looking at the dense spiritual qi around her, Mei Shuyan felt like she was in a fairyland. There was no other reason. According to her long experience, even when she was at the peak of her cultivation, the spiritual qi that she could gather in the Tianfa forest was not even 1/10 of the spiritual qi here. It was not even 1/100th of the spiritual qi here. The difference was like heaven and earth. Mei Shuyan estimated that the difference in the spiritual qi between the two places was more than 100 times. In addition, although the spiritual qi in the Tianfa forest was also very dense, far better than that of the mortal world, the quality of the spiritual qi was also very heterogeneous. After absorbing the spiritual qi in her body, she needed to spend a lot of effort to refine the spiritual qi before she could use it for her own use. But here, the spiritual qi was completely pure. It was all Xiantian's spiritual qi. There was no need to refine it. It was all the essence. If she were to compare the purity of the spiritual qi here, it was possible that the spiritual qi in her body was slightly inferior. It had only been a few days since he came here, but he had never leaped to the 4th grade. It was a leap of nearly 20 levels. Although this kind of low-level mystical beast did not require a lot of energy to advance, and it did not require a huge amount of spiritual qi like a high-level mystical beast, This kind of speed of advancement was something that had never been seen in the Tian Fa forest for tens of thousands of years. To put it in a more advanced way, it wouldn't be so fast, even if they were riding on a rocket. Even the previous generations of Tian Fa's Saint Kings would be flabbergasted if they saw such a terrifying rate of improvement. Gently stretching her body, Mei Shuiyin looked at the Hongjun Pagoda, which had already calmed down. Like a wisp of smoke, she climbed up a small tree beside her and stared at the door of the pagoda, waiting for Jun Imo Xie to come out of seclusion. Right at this moment, Jun Moxie's leisurely voice was heard. I use my eyes to see creation. I use my heart to split open the clear sky. When Mei Shuiyin heard this, she immediately became spirited. This familiar voice calmed her heart, and she suddenly felt warm and touched. This kind of feeling was really good, really good. As these words came out, Mei Shuiyin seemed to feel that there was something in her heart, a faintly discernible kind of comprehension. A white shadow flashed, and Jun Moxie floated down in front of her, smiling at her. Hey, you must be anxious from waiting, right? Mei Shuiyin blinked her eyes, tilted her head, and did not look at him. Jun Moxie was just about to reach out and hug her, but she disappeared like a wisp of smoke. Her snow-white figure moved in and out of the Hongjun Pagoda like a bolt of lightning, her speed extremely fast. Squatting on the ground far away, she rolled her eyes at Jun Moxie. Oof, you still want to take advantage of me? How could it be so easy? Even if I can't beat you, and I can't bear to bite you, I'm still so fast that you won't be able to catch me. Jun Moxie laughed heartily, but he was not in a hurry to chase after her. Squatting on the ground, he chuckled. You still want to run now? Oomph. When you're done, I'll carry you to bed. Let's see how you can run then. A look of embarrassment appeared in Mei Shuiyin's eyes, and she covered her face with her hands. Even her snow-white little tail was hidden under her body. Jun Moxie laughed heartily and dashed out. The moment he came out, Jun Moxie was stunned for a moment. In the burial ground, a Chi Tian Feng and the other two, a black-robed man was sitting there quietly, as if he was a statue, sitting there silently, not moving at all. It was the demon pupil saint, Lung Tong. Lung Tong did not seem to be surprised by Jun Moxie's sudden appearance. He said indifferently, "So you haven't left yet." Jun Moxie's heart skipped a beat, and he looked at him cautiously. "Do you know me?" Lung Tong smiled faintly, but there was an indescribable pain on his face. His eyes were even more profound, like a bottomless abyss, completely unable to reflect any emotions in his heart. He could only say bitterly, "I guess you don't know, but 3 days ago, I personally witnessed the battle between the 5 of you." He paused and raised his head to look at Jun Moxie. "Right here, I saw them being killed by you with my own eyes." As he said the last sentence, his voice suddenly wavered, as if he was trying to suppress the crazed excitement in his heart. "I see." Jun Moxie frowned and took a deep breath. His voice was heavy as he said, "I wonder why Saint Lung has been waiting here all this while. I didn't make a move that day, and I won't make a move now either. The reason why I'm staying here is not because I'm waiting for you." Lung Tong shook his head slowly, a trace of sorrow in his eyes. "I'm only here because my brothers are below. I want to guard their graves for 7 days. That's all. This is also the only thing that I, Lung Tong, can do. Since Saint Lung is so straightforward, I won't say any more words of condolences. I was the one who killed them, so it would be too hypocritical of me to say such things. I admit that I'm not a good person, but I'm also not a vile person." Jun Imo Xie said casually, "I'm sure Saint Lung knows why I wanted to kill them. Everyone knows the ins and outs of this matter. If Saint Lung doesn't intend to take revenge for your brothers, then I'll take my leave." Lung Tong sat quietly, his head lowered as he looked at the ground. Lang Lang said, "This matter is the Holy Land's fault. I can't find a reason to take revenge for them, so my brothers are dead. I, Lung Tong, am not someone who can't differentiate right from wrong. I'm not someone who can't differentiate right from wrong, nor do such despicable things. Furthermore, this lowly life of mine can't die before the war for seizing the heavens. It's not worth it to die in your hands." He paused for a moment and turned his head. "Furthermore, All of you are going to participate in the war for seizing the heavens. And you're only 18 years old, but you already have this level of cultivation. Your future is limitless. I believe that you'll have a longer life than us." He sucked in a deep breath and said bitterly, "Perhaps we'll need you to carry the burden in the next war for seizing the heavens. Although I'm stupid, I can still see the big picture clearly." He raised his head and looked at June Moxie. "So, no matter what, I will not be your enemy anymore. 7 days later, I'll set off for the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I'll wait quietly for the war for seizing the heavens a year and 7 months later. From now on, Lung Tong, will have nothing to do with me." June Moxie nodded deeply. "Since that's the case, I wish you a safe journey. Perhaps we'll meet again a year and a half later, and we'll have the chance to fight side by side." Lung Tong didn't reply to June Moxie's words. He slowly turned his back to June Moxie and muttered to himself, "The Saint Kings of the three holy lands might be able to see the bigger picture, but Mo Wudao will definitely not let off the person who killed his younger brother. Illusory blood sees Huyin Albua is also not someone who will be at a disadvantage. After this matter, who knows how much more carnage and carnage there will be? It's best to avoid it. The three holy lands don't know about this matter yet, but they won't be able to hide it for too long. Sooner or later, they'll find out. There's not much time left." After saying this, Lung Tong lowered his head and didn't make another sound. June Moxie stood silently for a while before sighing. "Thank you for the reminder. Take care." He cupped his fists and disappeared like a shooting star. Beneath the cliff beside the mound of earth, Lung Tong continued to sit quietly. The cold wind blew against his robes, making a rustling sound. His entire person seemed to have become one with the mound of earth where the four saints were buried. It was hard to tell if he was sad or desolate. From the conversation with Lung Tong, June Moxie understood that he'd already been in the Hongjun Pagoda for 3 days and 3 nights. June Moxie muttered to himself. Chun Chong and the rest hadn't spread any news, and Lung Tong obviously hadn't reported it to the Holy Lands. That meant that he still had some buffer time. If he used this as a basis, then it would take at least half a month for the 3 Holy Lands to confirm the news and send people over again. In this half a month, he could make all the arrangements he wanted. However, the matter of dealing with the Tianxiang imperial family had to be expedited. If he delayed it any longer, he might really not have the time to deal with it. On the way here, June Moxie had already felt that his original Xianqi cultivation had truly disappeared. However, this didn't mean that he'd lost his martial arts. Instead, what replaced it was another mysterious power. This power might not be stronger than the Xianqi he'd used before, but it was extremely flexible. It could be soft or hard. This seemed to be a new starting point. Although there wasn't any significant improvement in his martial arts, his meridians had undergone earth-shattering changes. He'd completely changed from a shotgun to a cannon. If the original spirit chi was ordinary cotton thread, then this faintly discernible purple chi would be the heavenly worm silk. Chapter 775. June Moxie could already imagine how strong he would be if his meridians were to be filled with this strange purple chi. However, he would need to accumulate this chi bit by bit. Although he didn't know when the next breakthrough would be, June Moxie could vaguely guess that he would need to wait until the purple chi in his meridians was filled to a certain extent before he would be able to reach the edge of the next breakthrough. The breakthrough from the 5th to the 6th level shouldn't be as short as the previous 5 levels. This would be a relatively long process of accumulation. Everything would depend on his future opportunities. When June Moxie returned to Tianxiang City, he was astonished to find that the entire city was in a mess. After asking around, he found out that the second prince's subordinates had thrown the entire city into chaos in the past 3 days. Under Li Yuren's arrangements, a few warriors from the second prince's residence coincidentally met the first prince's advisors in a restaurant at noon 2 days ago. Both parties coincidentally gathered in the same restaurant for a drink. Then, the second prince's warriors coincidentally got drunk. One of them wiped his nose in a drunken stupor, and coincidentally flung it into the delicious fish soup on the table of the first prince's aides. Therefore, the advisors were furious. They argued for what was right and talked nonsense. The two sides naturally clashed. The warriors were naturally not as good at talking as the advisors, but if they couldn't talk, they could use their swords. They directly drew their swords against each other. Then, the first prince's 7 advisors died under the blades of the second prince's warriors. The first prince was furious when he heard the news. How could he leave the matter at that? He brought his subordinates to find the second prince to settle the score. Both sides talked for a while, but somehow the discussion broke down. Then, nearly 1,000 warriors started fighting, and blood dyed the entire city red. Even the first prince was not spared, and a few of his teeth were knocked out. How could he swallow this humiliation? Therefore, he went to the emperor to lodge a complaint. In the end, the second prince went crazy. When he entered the palace to confront the emperor, he suddenly pulled out his sword and stabbed his own elder brother with a single stab, leaving a gaping hole on both sides. Naturally, this matter wasn't over yet, because this reality show was happening right in front of the emperor of the Tianxiang Empire. The two princes killing each other made their father so angry that he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. On the spot, he ordered that the second prince be demoted to a commoner and thrown into prison. His eldest son was stabbed to death by his second son with a sword, and it happened right in front of him. How could he bear the tragedy of his family? On the other hand, the third prince, who had received this news, was very happy. Needless to say, his second brother had stabbed his eldest brother to death. This was great. These two enemies were finished. He heard that his father was also very angry. The throne of the monarch was definitely not going to run away, and he immediately celebrated without restraint. The third prince was not the only one celebrating that day. On the same night, Li Yuran led the troops and stormed into the prison to rescue the second prince. A group of people returned to the imperial residence and began to drink and celebrate. Apart from being absurd, there was also a hint of evil in this whole matter. On the same night, all the forces under the second prince's command came out in full force. With the help of a group of strong and mysterious helpers, they easily wiped out the forces under the first prince's command. Among them were a few families and a dozen or so officials. They were slaughtered until blood flowed freely. Coincidentally, on that same night, the general of the garrison army in the capital city mysteriously disappeared. The heads of the several camps were also nowhere to be found. This directly caused the imperial bodyguards to be without a leader. Therefore, the second prince's bloody plan, which was not at all brilliant, went exceptionally smoothly. It was not until a day later that they found more than 10 corpses in an inconspicuous little well in the imperial palace. They were all the corpses of the various commanders of the imperial bodyguards. The little well was actually clogged up to the point where the water was overflowing. After personally witnessing his own sons killing each other and staining the palace with blood, the emperor finally made up his mind and announced that the third prince, Yangzhe, would be the crown prince. He also issued an imperial edict, summoning all the forces in Tianxiang to surround and kill the second prince. A fierce battle immediately broke out in the capital. However, the war this time had made His Majesty even more disheartened. The few big families had all chosen to stand by and watch. The Morong family had all resigned long ago. Those who insisted on not resigning were chased out of the family. The entire family was now preparing to move out of the capital and return to their hometown to enjoy their old age. Rescue the emperor? That was something that the officials of the court should do. What did it have to do with commoners like us? The Song family shut their doors. The Li family's grand preceptor Li openly stood on the second prince's side because of his grandson, Li Yuran. The Dugu family's doors were wide open, but not a single person came out. They were all watching the show. There was no way they could not watch the show. The 9 generals in the family had all fallen sick. Only one of them could come out now. There was no need to mention the Jun family. Old Master Jun Tian had already resigned a long time ago. All the disputes in Tianxiang had nothing to do with him. As for the Meng clan, which had always been on the same side as the first prince, they were immediately exterminated. It was said that the entire clan, not even a dog, could escape. Old Man Tang Wanli was loyal to his friends and gathered all the soldiers to help. However, they were intercepted halfway, and Old Man Tang was seriously injured. He fell unconscious and was rescued by the aristocratic hall's head shopkeeper, Tianxiang's fortune god Tang Yuan. None of the aristocratic families that supported the imperial power could be of any use. All of the generals had disappeared at the same time. The emperor, who had no other choice, decided to personally lead the army into battle and fight to the death with his own son. As a result, an extremely strange scene unfolded in the capital. The second prince, who was originally the weakest among them, seemed to have an unprecedented increase in his strength. He was actually able to fight evenly with the royal guards, who represented the Tianxiang imperial family. In fact, Liu Ran had even managed to gain the upper hand under his strategical maneuvers in the middle of the battle. The third prince, who had just woken up from his hangover, finally arrived with his troops. Together with his imperial father, they joined hands to deal with his second brother. Only then did they manage to suppress the second prince. But they were unable to break into the second prince's residence. The three sides fell into a stalemate. The entire capital was filled with thick smoke. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. At this time, Jun Moxie finally returned to the Jun residence. Old Master Jun and Jun Wui were looking into the distance from the tall tower in the residence. Old Master Jun frowned. He was somewhat worried. Jun Wui, on the other hand, looked like he was watching a play. Both father and son had different expressions on their faces. The capital has been very lively these days. Jun Moxie smiled faintly as he walked into the tall tower. Humph, lively, right? But if you say that you're not behind all this old man will never believe it. Grandpa Jun looked at his grandson hatefully. Only you could come up with such a sinister plan. What does this have to do with me? I have not been in the capital for the past few days. Even if I was in the capital, I am not familiar with any of them. I am being wronged. Jun Moxie had an innocent look on his face. Maybe the father and son are tired of playing games and want the father and son to personally go into battle for fun. That is reasonable. Third uncle, don't you think so? There are all kinds of people in this world. In order to consolidate their power, in order to obtain power, there is nothing that they cannot do. Jun Wui smiled helplessly. That is true. What else can a father and son not do? Power overturns the world. My desire is indeed enough to cover up my conscience. Jun Tian blew his beard. You little brat, stop talking nonsense. Look, our country is about to perish. Brothers killing each other, father and son killing each other. You call this a game? This is a game you are playing, right? Don't worry, grandfather. Tianxiang Kingdom will definitely not perish. How can I, as his son, destroy the country that my father protected back then? It will definitely not perish. Jun Moxie smiled mischievously as he walked over to Grandpa Jun's back. Diligently massaging his shoulders, he said, However, the culprit who harmed my father is delusional enough to sit on the throne and live a free and unfettered life. Grandpa, such a good show is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Let's enjoy it. Then you two little brats can slowly enjoy it. This old man is old and tired. I'm going to sleep now. Don't look for me if there is something, and don't look for me if there is nothing. Old Master Jun went down angrily. You did it, right? Jun Wui turned his head and looked at his nephew. Actually, it really can't be considered as my doing. At most, I just gave him a few reminders and did not do anything else. Jun Moxie laughed and winked. Third uncle, these few days, have you been happy? Third Master Jun's face turned red, and he said with a straight face, What happy? This is simply ridiculous. Don't interrupt. I am serious here. I'm being serious. You've done everything you should have done, right? Jun Xie asked humbly. Done what? What nonsense are you spouting? Are you asking for a beating? Jun Wui's face turned red, and he avoided his nephew's strange gaze guiltily. He forcefully put on the demeanor of an elder and scolded. Don't talk nonsense. If you talk nonsense again, be careful that third uncle will teach you a lesson. Third uncle. Jun Moxie put on a straight face and said earnestly, "It is not good to live together before marriage. Even if you don't mind, does third aunt not mind? Even if third aunt doesn't mind, this kind of behavior will have a great impact on the younger generation. As the saying goes, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. It turns out that I have been naughty since I was young because of your influence. Today, I have finally found the root of my problem." Third Master June stared at him and said angrily, "Good boy, you still dare to speak such nonsense. You have been a debauchee since you were young. What does that have to do with me? I've always been upright and plain-spoken, and I'm unyielding and unyielding. Unlike you, an adult who does not have a proper posture when standing or sitting. Every time I see you, I want to beat you up. Now that you have become capable, do you think that third uncle does not dare to teach you a lesson? No matter how capable you are still my nephew." Chapter 776. Jun Wui's face turned red. He gritted his teeth and said, "Little bastard, do you really want to get beaten up?" Jun Moxie laughed and said, "Third uncle, what is my third aunt doing now? She can't be with you all day, right?" Jun Wu revealed a gentle look in his eyes as he said, "She doesn't have time to deal with me right now. She's wholeheartedly taking care of those children. She has invited famous doctors from all over the world. Then, she told me that she intends to build a big base to take care of those poor children who are stranded in the world. It doesn't matter if they're children of soldiers or refugees." Jun Moxie let out a long sigh of relief and said, "Third Aunt is really a good person." His eyes flashed and said, "However, third uncle, I'm afraid this matter can only be carried out after a while. You better be prepared. We must move in the near future. Leave Tianxiang City." Jun Wui was shocked and said, "Why? Leave Tianxiang City? To where? Is this necessary?" "It is absolutely necessary. We must move to the Tian Fa forest as soon as possible." Jun Moxie took a deep breath and said, "I came here today to discuss this matter with you." Jun Wui's face became serious and said, "For the 3 holy lands?" "Yes, only there will be relatively safe." Jun Imo sucked in a deep breath and furrowed his brows. "The former, the 3 holy lands lost 9 venerables and 600 experts in the snowy mountains. And this time in Tianxiang City, none of the 9 saints returned. This hatred is too big, and there is no room for reconciliation. I may have the ability to protect myself, but I don't have the ability to protect the entire family. If the 3 holy lands come again, then I'm afraid their way of doing things will not be the same as before. Although the situation was serious before, it was not to the point of no return. However, after suffering such a huge loss this time, if they make any moves, they will definitely not look down on us anymore. When that time comes, I'm afraid that either you or I will die. Our Jun family will suffer heavy casualties." Jun Moxie said helplessly, "Therefore, in order to avoid casualties on our side, we must retreat. Retreat into the Tian Fa forest. In fact, this is the only place where I can feel more at ease. If it's really that serious, not only will we have to retreat, I'm afraid the Dugu family, Duanmu family, Sikong family, and Dongfang family will also have to retreat." Jun Wui said resolutely, "The 3 holy lands will not spare our Jun family, but these few families are also targets for their revenge. If something happens to them, how can we, uncle and nephew, feel at ease?" Jun Moxie let out a long sigh and said, "Third uncle, it's too late. The only thing they could do now was to transfer the important people to Tian Fa. As long as the important people leave, with the arrogance of the 3 holy lands, no matter how unbearable they will not lay their hands on ordinary people. If that's the case, then I'll immediately go find Brother Duanmu and Brother Sikong to discuss this matter." Jun Wu spoke in a resolute and decisive manner. "Mo, Xie, you'll be in charge of arranging the Shin beasts. There's no time to lose. Since you've decided to retreat, then retreat as soon as possible. The sooner the better." Jun Moxie smiled and said, "Third uncle, please rest assured, I've already made arrangements for Bear Mountain and the rest of the Shin Beast Kings. We'll wait for your side to finish discussing. Then we will immediately move. We must evacuate all the important people in the first batch. After that, we will quickly build a base in the Tianfa forest. Only then will we be able to better fight against the three holy lands. At least, we won't be under the threat of being overturned at any time. Jun Moxie said with great fascination. He had already thought that although Mei Shuyan could not come out for the time being, and was not willing to come out in a non-human form, if she knew that she had returned to the Tianfa forest, she would still be very happy. Jun Wui nodded and said, "There's no time to lose. I will go and make arrangements now." As he said that, his figure flashed and disappeared. Third Master Jun was an understanding person. He clearly understood that this was not a normal time, and there might be a sudden attack from a powerful enemy at any time. Since they had already decided to retreat, then they had to be swift and decisive, and not the slightest bit of delay. At this moment, only Jun Moxie was left on top of the tower. Facing the billowing smoke in the city, Jun Dashao suddenly felt an indescribable emptiness in his heart, or perhaps frustration. These inexplicable and subtle feelings came from his heart, his emotions. He had teased Junwoo Yi, but it had evoked his own feelings. He was already 18 years old, and he was about to face the matter of marriage and family. Right now, Jun Moxie's heart was a little conflicted. As a man, he would naturally have thoughts when he saw a beautiful woman, and Jun Moxie was no exception, not to mention Guanqing Han, whose body and mind belonged to him, and Dugu Xiaoi, who was already engaged by the two old men of the two families. Guanqing Han was gentle and stubborn, cold and solemn, and beautiful like a fairy. Dugu Xiaoi was lively and playful, cute and adorable, and her looks were one in a million. However, Jun Moxie was surprised to find that during this period of time, he had not thought about them at all, but he had placed all his heart and soul on Mei Shuyan. Jun Moxie also knew that this was undoubtedly unfair to Guanqing Han and Dugu Xiaoi. Dugu Xiaoi, from the time he was a debauchee, had a unique insight and had taken a liking to him at first sight. For him, she had spared no effort to fight for him. Although some things were a little absurd and even led to a lot of unexpected changes, this little girl's heart was firmly tied to him, and this was an indisputable fact that no one could deny. Jun Moxie saw it in his eyes and remembered it in his heart. In the face of such feelings, how could Jun Moxie be indifferent? And Guanqing Han's sacrifice for the Jun family was also obvious to all. She would rather give up her life for the Jun family, and not just once. In order to save his life, she didn't even hesitate to sacrifice her chastity. In the face of such a woman, how could Jun Moxie not be moved and not cherish her? But sometimes a person was such a contradiction. Jun Moxie clearly knew all this, and he also knew that these two women were destined to be with him in this life. But in his heart, there was still a touch of guilt. Whether it was for Mei Shuyan, Guanqing Han, or Dugu Xiaoi, they were all like this. A man could not fall in love with two women at the same time, because there was always only one true love. As long as one fell in love, it would be inseparable for a lifetime, or even for eternity. Jun Moxie's love for Mei Shuyan was real. For Guanqing Han, it was appreciation and responsibility. For Dugu Xiaoi, it was pity, love, and responsibility. They all had feelings. Or it was a common problem of men, ambiguity. It was undeniable that if Guanqing Han or Dugu Xiaoi left now, Jun Moxie would not be able to accept it either. He would be furious. He would be sad. But if Mei Shuyan left, it would completely break his heart, and he would go completely crazy. Men, amen. Am I also a man who can't escape for vulgarity? Jun Moxie smiled bitterly as he analyzed his strange state of mind. But the more he analyzed, the more confused he became. For the first time, he felt that being a man with 3 wives and 4 concubines was actually very tiring, and not all of it was happiness. Am I still a F*** determined killer? Jun Moxie smiled bitterly and asked himself, would an assassin, especially a king of assassins, be like me? It seemed that no one could answer this question. Because men and women were the same, they were also creatures born with extreme contradictions. Even the most loyal man would take a second look at a beautiful woman on the street. The love of beauty was something that everyone had. Since there was no answer after thinking hard, then he would just let nature take its course. June Moxie slowly walked down the tower, his heart in a mess, and it was difficult to sort it out. For the first time in his life, he did not dare to face his own feelings, and it was the first time he was so passive. By the time June Moxie arrived at the meeting hall, June Wu he had already gathered everyone together, and everyone was in the middle of a discussion. Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyan were originally roaming the pugilistic world, and they did not care much about where the June family would move to. What really surprised June Moxie was the opinions of the Dongfang family, Duanmu family, and Sikong family. The Dongfang Wenqing directly expressed the most resolute rejection of the decision to move the entire family to the Tian Fa forest. Third brother, your suggestion is not appropriate. Although the June family has the reputation of being a super family, there are still very few of us. If we say we want to move to the Tian Fa forest, we will move. We, the Dongfang family, have finally broken our oath, and we want to take this opportunity to regain our former glory. Why would we hide in the Tian Fa forest? Let's not talk about anything else. That place is still the territory of the Tian Fa beasts. We can talk about friendship with the Beast Kings, but it is impossible for the Dongfang family to seek shelter in the Tian Fa forest. Moreover, the three Holy Lands have a grudge with the June family, and it is difficult to turn the situation around, but there is no direct relationship with the Dongfang family. Mo Wudao may be narrow-minded, but he is still a master of his generation. He will not take out his anger on a worldly family like us. Therefore, we, the Dongfang family, will not retreat. Dongfang Wendao and Dongfang Wenjian also had the same opinion. What was even more unexpected to June Moxie was that Sikong and Yi and Duanmu Chao Fan also had the same opinion. The June family will bear the brunt of the attack, so there is nothing wrong with retreating, but there is no need for our two families to do so. After all, the three Holy Lands are also a positive force. If they really take out their anger on us worldly families, then the three Holy Lands will not be able to afford to lose face. Therefore, third brother can rest assured. However, we also agree with Moxie's opinion. If the June family does not retreat, they will inevitably suffer the most bitter revenge of the three Holy Lands. Chapter 777. There's no need to discuss this matter anymore. Dongfang Wenqing was displeased. We can't afford to lose the Dongfang family's legacy and reputation. Even if he had to die, he couldn't afford to lose it. Sunrise Dongfang. Only I am undefeated. We are about to create this glory. If we hide in Tian Fa and hide under the wings of the beasts, how can we talk about reviving the Dongfang family? Since they'd already spoken to such an extent, it could be said that they'd come to the end. If they were to force a truce, then they'd really be shedding all pretenses of cordiality. June Moxie had no choice but to instruct everyone to be vigilant. Then, he gave them as many healing pills as he could and arranged for many messenger falcons to be used for communication. He also used the subordinates of the Eagle King of the Tian Fa forest. They had to keep each other informed at all times so that they could provide support in case of any changes. The next day, Dongfang Wenqing, Duanmu Chao Fan, and the others left Tian Xiang and hurried back to their respective families. Junjian Tian went to look for Dugu Zongheng to discuss this matter, but was met with a rebuff. Dugujan Tian was in the middle of drinking when he heard the news brought by Grandpa June. He could not help but stare blankly for a long time. Then he waved his hand and said, "You go, I won't go. The Dugu family is not going anywhere." Junjian Tian had known him for a lifetime, so how could he not understand what he was thinking? He didn't try to persuade him any further. He sighed and silently got up to leave. Dugu Zongheng silently looked at Junjian Tian's back. Junjian Tian was about to walk out of the door when Dugu Zongheng suddenly said in a low voice, tell your grandson to treat my granddaughter well. That is the treasure of the Dugu family. If he mistreats him, I'll kill him." Junjan Tian stood in silence for a while. Then, he let out a long sigh and walked away, leaving behind only a few words. "I'll leave the people of Tian Xiang to you." Dugu Zongheng watched him walk away. Then he suddenly raised his head and gulped down a big bowl of wine. He muttered, "Grand Supreme Elder, you understand me best. I, Dugu Zongheng, have never been a person who longs for power. Those few brats at home are also not good at scheming. But the two main pillars of the Tianxiang Kingdom's military have protected Tianxiang for 60 years. Tianxiang Kingdom does not only have an emperor, there are also hundreds of millions of common people. Your Jun family will certainly leave. But what will they do if the Dugu family also leaves? How can this old man bear to see the people plunge into misery and suffering? We, the 9 men of the Dugu family, still have to hold up the rivers and mountains for the billions of people. It doesn't matter whether I appreciate it or not." In short, this is one of the few things that I, Dugu Zongheng, have in my life. As for the imperial family, when have I ever placed the imperial family's glory, splendor, and wealth in my eyes? Dugu Zongheng slumped down on the table after he finished speaking. The wine bowl fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. However, he was still muttering to himself, "Heroes rush forward. How can the heroes of our Dugu family retreat at such a precarious time?" He could only charge forward. Charge forward, ah? Otherwise, the whole of Tianxiang will be a scene of desolation and flames of war. We can't go, we can't go." The Jun family was busy preparing for the evacuation. Only Grandpa Jun was sitting alone on the Jun family's tower. He was lost in thought as he looked outside. Tianxiang City. Every brick, every tile, every blade of grass. It seemed as if he could not see enough. This is the place that this old man and his family have guarded for a lifetime. For this place, this old man has fought on horses and spears and escaped from death hundreds of times. For this place, Wu Hui stood up without hesitation and transformed into a god of war to fight on the battlefield. The wind and moon on the other side of the mountain pass, the cold wind of the desert, the hooves of the horses on the grasslands, and the whistling of the banners. Who in the Jun family had not experienced this? Grandpa Jun looked on quietly, and his eyes slowly filled with sparkling tears. 2 lines of tears slowly flowed down his cheeks and hung on his snow-white beard. Then they dripped down to the ground, drop after drop from youth to old age. How many brothers had turned into bones in front of his eyes? How many good men had fought under his leadership, and their corpses had been buried on the battlefield? His own sons and grandsons had spilled their blood on this piece of land. The gleam of swords still flashed in front of his eyes, and the majestic and sorrowful bugle horn still rang in his ears. The eyes of his brothers before they died were still in his heart, and the cries of death still reverberated in his chest. Big Brother Jun, Big Brother Jun. Junjan Tian fiercely closed his eyes, and his old face twitched. He lowered his head and tightly closed his eyes. Only his shoulders trembled slightly. Can't bear to. Really can't bear to. But now, I'm finally going to leave. This place has obviously left me with countless tears of blood and countless regrets. But why does my heart feel so sour when I think about leaving? A hero fights 100 battles lightly, and a warrior never looks back. The winds of an iron horse break the ice river, and the blood of the dreaming soul saber thickens. Junjan Tian was almost choking with sobs as he recited this poem. This was a poem that he would often recite loudly with his old brothers while wiping the blood off their swords. Now, how many people still remember it? Junjan Tian's tears flowed down his face, but he gritted his teeth and said each word in a sobbing voice. "Brothers, I really have to leave. Leave this place where your heroic souls are. If you miss me, I hope to meet you in my dreams." This staunch old man did not cry when his son died, nor did he cry when his grandson died. But today, he could not help but shed tears of emotion, because he was about to leave this land that he loved so deeply, the land that he had spent his entire life watering. Even though this land had let him down, even though the imperial power of this land had harmed him, taking away his son and framing his grandson, but this land was still something that Junjian Tian had fought through hundreds of battles to obtain. The entire Jun family had gone through many hardships to protect it. Humans are not plants. How can they be emotionless? At this point, he had no choice but to leave. Because if he insisted on not leaving, Jun Wui and Jun Moxie would definitely not leave either. If that happened, the Jun family would truly be finished. 2 of his sons and grandsons had already died for this land. Would his last son and grandchild also be buried in this land? No, absolutely not. So he had to leave, even though he was reluctant to leave. But now, he had to be responsible for his family. Jun Mo Xie was alone. His green robes fluttered in the wind as he strolled along the desolate street. He was walking in the direction of the battle cries, neither too fast nor too slow. His demeanor was very leisurely, and his steps were relaxed. But the interval between each step was surprisingly consistent. He walked very attentively, and even very solemnly, because the end of the road was the end of the feud. The blood debt of the white General Jun Wu Hui, the death of the iron blood god of war Jun Wu Meng, the lives of his 2 brothers Mo Yu and Mo Cho, and the 10 years of his mother's sleep. Today, he would take revenge from the main culprit. All the price. Today, the Jun family had decided to leave. So, Jun Moxie would definitely not do anything that would cause trouble. No matter what, today, the feud was settled. The second prince was indeed cooperative, and Li Yuran was also nimble enough to settle one of them in such a short period of time, and even cause such a huge commotion. So, since it's like this, it's better to be on time than to be on time. I might as well use this auspicious day to settle the past. All the feud will end today. I, the only descendant of the Jun family, will personally take revenge. From now on, the Jun family will have no more regrets. Not for generations to come. Tianxiang Main Street. Countless houses have been torn down. The once bustling streets and residential areas had turned into battlefields for both sides. In this place that wasn't very big, there were nearly 30 to 40,000 people shouting and fighting. Blood flowed everywhere, and limbs flew in all directions. There were people who fell to the ground due to injuries or died a violent death. A moment ago, they were still shouting and fighting, but in the next moment, they had already turned into corpses that still had body temperature. The logisticians were constantly rushing forward to rescue the injured on their side. But those who were at the center of the battle could only accept their bad luck. That was not a place where non-combatants could easily set foot. On the emperor's side, the emperor of Tianxiang was extremely awe-inspiring. He was clad in a golden helmet and armor, and was riding a snow-white divine warhorse. He held a 3-feet-long sword in his hand, and had personally led the troops into battle. He had sworn to kill his own son. Behind him was the third prince, Yang Zhe. His face was also impassioned, and he did not fear death. However, there were only 40 to 50 people beside him, raising their shields to protect him. It looked like this third prince was also very afraid of death. In front of them, far away, the second prince was riding a fiery red steed. He was circling back and forth like a donkey going back and forth on a grinder. His spittle was flying everywhere, and his face was ferocious. Kill, 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 kill for this prince. Kill those 2 sons of cheese. This prince will definitely reward them handsomely. When this prince ascends to the throne, all of you will be loyal subjects who founded the country. Glory, wealth, high positions, and generous salaries will be within your reach. If we succeed in this battle, our glory will shine for generations to come. On the high walls of the second prince's residence, there was actually a chair suspended in the air. This chair was tied to 2 large trees on both sides with 2 ropes. It was at least a few dozen zhang above the ground, and the person sitting on it was young Master Li Yuran. His white robes fluttered in the wind, and he held a feather fan in his hand. He was smiling and talking freely, and his expression was relaxed. He really did look like the beautiful Zhou Lang of the 3 kingdoms. As he spoke and laughed, The oars were turned to ashes. Li Yuren's eyes were sharp as he observed the situation of the battle. He was calm and unruffled. He waved the fan in his hand to the left, and the messenger on the left raised the small flag in his hand and waved it. In the midst of the battle, a bugle horn sounded from the second prince's side, and the battle formation would change accordingly. From time to time, he would wave it to the right, and another change would occur. Jun Moxie smiled as he watched this scene quietly. He suddenly realized that the second prince's military strength was at an absolute disadvantage. However, under the command of Li Yuran, as the battle formation changed continuously, the entire battlefield had turned into a meat grinder. Both sides had casualties, but the Emperor's side had the most casualties. They were outnumbered, and it was not impossible to turn the tables. Jun Moxie could even be sure that this strange situation had been deliberately created by Li Yuran. Chapter 778. More importantly, up until now, the Li family's troops had yet to participate in this battle. It should be known that Grand Preceptor Li's forces, which had been accumulated over the years, might not have many experts. But for an ordinary army, they were definitely the elites of the elites. If they joined the battle, it would definitely lead to a decisive change. At the very least, it would not cause the second prince's side to sink in such a bitter battle, with the possibility of being overturned at any time. Although the Emperor's side would certainly have other backup plans, Li Yuren's main goal in controlling this battle was to cause as much chaos as possible in the capital city, to create as much trouble as possible. The bigger the better. He was already as certain as a mountain in his heart. In any case, Jun Moxie would come out to clean up the mess in a while. This battle before him, he would just take it as watching the show. No matter how many died, he, the great young Master Li, would not care. It would be best if all of them died. This Li Yuran is really a talent. Jun Moxie sighed and murmured, "You are a beauty. How can you become a thief?" He raised his eyes to look in the direction of the Prince Equivalent's residence, thinking about the little rascal Yang Mo's appearance. But in his heart, he was thinking, this Li Yuran, should I keep him alive? If I keep him alive, is it good or bad? Such a talent, to kill, is really a pity. But if I keep him alive, in this world apart from me, who else can control Li Yuran's shocking talent and peerless schemes? Yang Mo, can he do it? Facing the slaughter of thousands of soldiers and horses, Jun Moxie only minded his own business, as if the slaughter in front of him was not worth watching, and he did not care about it all. The murderous aura and the waves of shouts, accompanied by the early spring wind, blew across his forehead, and a few strands of his long hair fluttered in the wind, revealing his slightly furrowed brows at this moment. Jun Moxie looked somewhat melancholic, like a youth who was ignorant of the world, facing the spring flowers, the autumn moon, and the flowing river, inexplicably worrying, "Long live! Hooray!" At this moment, a roar rang out on the battlefield like a tsunami. Jun Moxie calmly raised his head to look. It was the Emperor, who had not been able to take down the enemy after attacking for a long time, holding a long sword in his hand and riding his horse into the battlefield. The guards behind him were afraid that something would happen to him, and quickly followed. The Emperor was personally leading the army into battle. This was undoubtedly a huge boost to the morale of the army. The Imperial Army's eyes were practically bloodshot as they pounced forward as if they did not care about their own lives. As the saying went, when a general risked his life, he would be invincible against 10,000 men. Right now, it was not just one general risking his life. For a period of time, the pressure on the second prince's side increased by several folds. Even if they had the support of a superior formation, Li Yuren's brilliant commands would not be enough. The third prince, who was surrounded and protected by the crowd, saw that his side had gained the upper hand and the second prince's side was starting to lose ground. He immediately became spirited and shouted, "Bring the drums." This crown prince wants to personally beat the drum and cheer for Imperial Father. I hope that Imperial Father is wise and mighty and can kill that heinous rebel Yang Dan in one fell swoop. Very quickly, a subordinate brought over a large drum. The third prince flung his cloak and walked forward valiantly. He took the drumsticks and began to beat the drum like a storm. It was actually quite rhythmic. It looked like the rumors that this crowned prince usually beat the drum and did kuju naked for his wives and concubines were not groundless rumors after all. Looking at his vigor today, it was obvious that he had trained for a long time. The drum beat was as dense as raindrops. The surrounding soldiers all shouted, "Your Majesty is mighty! Your Majesty is mighty! Our army will definitely win." The cheers shook the heavens and the earth, as if they had already achieved complete victory. But no one could have imagined that the crown prince was beating the drum and cheering for his imperial father, because the emperor had already gone into battle. As the crown prince, it would be inappropriate for him to not go up. But if he went up, this mighty crown prince was simply too afraid of death. That was why he thought of such a compromise. Beating the drum, although it could boost morale, it was still the rear, and it was the rear. Even an arrow would not be able to hit it. It had to be said that this crown prince could be considered a talented person. At the very least, he was able to come up with an idea in an emergency. The battle at the front of the battlefield was getting more and more intense. Both sides were beating the drums like thunder, banners fluttering in the wind, and there was a sea of people. Right at this moment, something that no one could have imagined happened. The third prince, Yangzhe, heir, the current crown prince, suddenly threw the drumsticks aside and stood up, his blood boiling. Stretching his neck like a chicken, he raised his head to the sky and let out a long howl. That howl pierced through the clouds and the sun. As expected, he raised his head to the sky and let out a long howl, full of vigor and passion. Just as he finished his long howl, he suddenly took large strides forward, walking towards his warhorse with an awe-inspiring demeanor. His gait was vigorous and resolute, sonorous and powerful. His back was straight, and his legs were as wide as possible as he walked in a straight catwalk, displaying the imposing demeanor of a crown prince. Everyone who saw this couldn't help but praise in their hearts. This is our crown prince. Look how valiant he is, how unafraid of death, how heroic. What is going on here? What kind of statement is this? The crown prince was full of vigor as he flipped onto the back of his warhorse. Suddenly, under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, he pulled out his horsewhip and lashed it viciously on the warhorse's rump. With a loud roar, his usual duck-like voice sounded especially heroic at this moment. This crown prince is going. A man should die for his country. Why must he return with his body wrapped in horse leather? Imperial father, your asterisk is here. He actually came up with a poem on the spot. And this poem was actually so impassioned that it was enough to be passed down through the ages. As expected of the crown prince who excelled in both the pen and the sword. As expected of the crown prince, some people started praising him again, but when they heard the crown prince's last sentence, they were all dumbfounded. Their mouths were wide open, and their faces were filled with shock. Imperial father, your asterisk is here. What kind of words are these? Don't tell me that your imperial father doesn't bring this thing with him normally? Does he even need you to deliver it? If he doesn't, then where did the three of you brothers come from? But if he calls himself that, isn't that a little too out of line? Could it be that this is a form of endearment between father and son? In that instant, everyone's eyes widened and their eyes widened in shock. Other than Jun Dashao, there was no one else who could have orchestrated such a strange scene. Speaking of which, the appearance of this asterisk was quite a bit of a story. The third prince, Yangzhe, had a character in his name. The less knowledgeable Jun Dashao did not seem to recognize it, and there was no need for him to recognize it either. Thus, he had always separated it and pronounced it as GG. At this moment, he used the soul manipulation technique on the crown prince, but he still used his usual way of addressing the crown prince. Naturally, it was your asterisk is here. The relatively uncultured Jun Dashao had actually caused the new crown prince of Tianxiang to become such a huge joke in front of so many people, in such a bloody battlefield. Dashao felt a little apologetic in his heart. However, the crown prince had clearly called out Gigi. As for what others thought of it could only be said that these people's thoughts were too impure. This young master need not feel too guilty about it. Besides, he was someone who was about to die anyway. He could call him whatever he wanted. It all happened in the blink of an eye. Just when everyone was in a daze, the crown prince whipped his horse and urged it forward. His eyebrows danced with joy as he charged out from the army of tens of thousands of soldiers with an unstoppable momentum. He took the lead and charged towards his father on the battlefield. At the same time, he continued to shout out, "Imperial father, your little GG is here." In that instant, everyone on both sides of the battlefield stared at each other in shock. Some people even raised their swords in astonishment, forgetting to slash down. Instead, they tilted their heads to look at the crown prince who was madly charging towards them, their faces full of disbelief. Then, the second prince's side was the first to snap out of their daze. Then they burst into laughter. Each and every one of them clutched their stomachs as tears and snot flowed down their faces. "Your Majesty, it turns out that you've come out to fight, but you're afraid that your precious thing will get hurt. So, you've actually stored in advance. Your Majesty is truly far-sighted. Tianxiang Empire has such a cautious emperor. Why would you need to worry about not being able to accomplish great things? We're all men here. We can understand your way of doing things, haha." The entire battlefield was filled with laughter. There was no distinction between friend or foe. The emperor's face turned green with anger. He wanted to flare up, but who could he flare up at this moment? Who would care about you if you flare up at the other party? Wouldn't it chill the hearts of the soldiers if you flare up at your own people? Left with no other choice, he shouted while trembling, "Evil creature, what nonsense are you spouting?" The crown prince, Yang Zhe, had charged over valiantly, but ended up eating a hot fart. His face was filled with shock and grievance. "Imperial father, it's me, I'm your little GG, I'm here to help you in battle, Why are you still scolding me? I'm your little GG, You don't want me anymore." Even though Jun Moxie was concealed, he was still laughing so hard that his stomach hurt. However, at this point, the show was more or less done. It was time to draw the curtains. His divine sense pointed at the crown prince's head, and the crown prince suddenly roared with righteous indignation. "Sheep's egg! Get your ass over here to die for this old man." This time, he'd directly become his second brother's old man. The emperor was so angry that his eyes and mouth turned crooked, but before the emperor could reprimand him, Crown Prince Yang Zhe's roar thundered like thunder as he continued to spew vulgarities from his mouth. At the same time, he whipped his horse and galloped like a dragon. With a leap, he leaped into the battlefield and galloped towards the second prince's side. Whenever the enemies encountered him or stood in his way, they would all fall back. Wherever the hooves of the horses went, it was like a large ship sailing across a calm lake, the waves parting and rolling, forcefully carving out a broad path for him. It was a peerless style of taking the head of a general amidst an army of 10,000. Ayo, His Highness the Crown Prince is mighty. Some of the bootlickers had already begun to cheer loudly. Chapter 779. Just when everyone was feeling relieved, thinking that the Crown Prince's move was too beautiful and too sharp, he only needed to wait for the knife to fall, and the rebel in front of him would bow his head and be executed. This was a huge achievement. If such a brave crown prince were to ascend the throne in the future, he would definitely be a wise ruler. What kind of heroic spirit would be needed to accomplish such a lone hero? The heavens have blessed my Tianxiang to have such a hero. The crown prince will definitely lead the Tianxiang Empire to a more glorious future. Even unifying the continent and destroying all the countries would not be impossible. In that instant, everyone on the emperor's side had their eyes lit up, and their blood was boiling. Some of them had even started to prepare themselves. They took a deep breath and filled their lungs, ready to exhale at any time. As soon as the crown prince's saber fell, they would immediately shout with all their might. The second prince was like a piece of meat on the chopping board. There was no room for escape. Even the emperor, who was in the middle of the battle, had an indescribable look of joy in his eyes. There was even a trace of heartache. Right at this moment, a strange change occurred. The crown prince of Tianxiang, who had been as handsome as a deity, suddenly turned his head and looked around. His expression was abnormally panicked, as if he had just woken up from a dream. He suddenly burst into tears and snot. "Mother, father, why am I here? Woo, don't kill me. Second brother, my dear second brother. I beg you, don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I'm willing to be your slave. Don't kill me." Following another pu sound, a yellow and white substance flowed down the crown prince's trousers, and the entire battlefield was filled with a foul stench. He was so scared that he had lost control of his bowels, and his bowels were wet. This was really like a yellow river falling from the 9 heavens. The second prince saw his good third brother riding his horse towards him as if there was no one there. He wanted to dodge, but strangely, he couldn't move his body at all. He was in despair and almost closed his eyes to wait for death. After all, his third brother, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, had taken the lead and rushed in front of him like a hot knife through butter. The second prince only had time to think to himself, "My life is over." He only knew that he was definitely going to die this time. He closed his eyes helplessly, but after waiting for a long time, he heard the crown prince begging for mercy. And why was the person he was begging for mercy me? How is this possible? Shouldn't I be the one begging for mercy? Then the second prince heard a strange sound, as if a person with diarrhea suddenly ate croton and couldn't hold it anymore. Then he smelled a stench similar to that of a latrine. The second prince opened his eyes as if he was in a dream. He saw that the crown prince, who had been so majestic a moment ago, was now like the most pitiful worm in the world, looking at him with a pleading expression. His face was deathly still and full of despair, and his face was already red from crying. His entire body was shaking violently like an old sow sifting chaff. What was going on? The second prince blinked, but the crown prince had already rolled down from his horse. He crawled on the ground, his trousers dripping with liquid, leaving a strange yellowish-brown mark on the ground. He raised his head and looked at the second prince, second brother. "Sob, sob, sob, my dear second brother. Please don't kill me. As long as you let me go, I will never fight with you for the throne. I am willing to do anything for you. Second brother, your majesty, please spare my life, your majesty, your head." The second prince finally came back to his senses. He thought about how he was so scared by this little bastard that he couldn't even move. He couldn't help but feel hot on his face. Anger rose in his heart, and he became bold. He roared fiercely and pulled out his sword. He jumped off his horse and slashed at the crown prince's head without hesitation. "Aren't you the newly appointed crown prince? Aren't you very powerful? Weren't you very powerful just now? Come on, come on. Why aren't you powerful anymore? Show some more power." As he roared crazily, he raised his sword again and fiercely stabbed it into his brother's heart. Then he pulled it out and stabbed it again. This went on for dozens of times. The crown prince's body was completely like a hornet's nest. His head and limbs were also scattered into pieces. The second prince let out a ferocious roar. Suddenly, he raised his leg and kicked the incomplete body on the ground up into the air. He laughed wickedly. "You little bastard, are you going to fight with me for the throne again? F***CK. I'm going to kill you, you little bastard." In the end, the second prince, who had always been weak, was also panting from exhaustion. But his hands and feet did not stop moving. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was panting like a mad bull. Regardless of friend or foe, everyone stopped fighting at this moment and stared blankly at this scene. In everyone's eyes, there was the same expression: disbelief, unimaginable. Everyone's eyeballs were popping out. How could something like this happen in this world? God, save me. There's something wrong with my eyes. This is something that even the gods can't imagine. How could it happen in front of my eyes? What is going on? Are we dreaming? How can this world be so crazy? At the same time, the emperor of the Tianxiang Empire came back to his senses. His entire body was trembling and twitching. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth was wide open. It was as if he couldn't hear anything. It was as if he was watching a silent pantomime. His youngest son, the only one who had the qualifications to inherit his throne, had died tragically in front of his eyes at the hands of his rebellious second son. And he had died without a complete corpse. It was close to a death by 1,000 cuts. He shuddered and finally came to his senses. He felt a tearing pain in his chest. Suddenly, he cried out in a heart-wrenching voice, "My good son." He could only see stars in front of his eyes. Looking up, the sun was blinding, and he felt dizzy. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale gold. Then his entire body fell off the back of the horse. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" The guards beside him were also shocked. They finally came back to their senses and hugged him. And this poor emperor finally fainted. Among his 3 sons, his eldest son had been killed by his second son right in front of him in the Golden Imperial Hall with a sword through his heart. And now his youngest son had also died in the hands of his own brother. A tragedy of flesh and blood killing each other. In a short span of 3 days, it had happened twice in front of him. Although Yang Huayu had always been steady, quick-witted, and extremely shrewd, but at the end of the day, he was still a human. This kind of blood was thicker than water. Even in the royal palace, where there were no relatives, it was still suitable. He was still a father. And at this moment, he was a father at the end of his road, a ruler at the end of his rope. A king deserted by his own people. This kind of blow, no matter who it was hard to bear. The imperial camp was in a state of chaos. The awe-inspiring aura from before had disappeared in an instant. On the other hand, the second prince was overjoyed. He laughed wildly and said, "That old bastard finally can't take it anymore. Everyone charge, no matter who it is. As long as you can chop off that old bastard Yang Huayu's head and bring it to me, I will bestow upon you the title of a duke and grant you a vast land. The title will be hereditary, and the death exemption gold plate will stay in the family forever." Right now, the second prince had already started to refer to himself as I. But the moment this order was given, it was as if a bucket of oil had been poured onto a raging fire. Everyone joined the army for their pay. Who wouldn't want a high position, a high salary, wealth and splendor, to bestow upon his wife and children, and to be a duke and marquis for 10,000 generations? Furthermore, the second prince had promised to bestow upon them the title of a duke and grant them a vast land. Just this alone was enough to ignite all the blood in their bodies. Not to mention the words that came after that were like thunder from the heavens. Hereditary. The death exemption gold plate will stay in the family forever. It was completely crazy, boiling with excitement. Even among the soldiers in the imperial camp, there were many whose eyes were flickering. They were considering if they should take advantage of the chaos to chop off this most valuable head and send it to His Royal Highness the Second Prince. After all, such an opportunity might only come once in their lives. Even if they didn't chop it off, others would. Rather than letting others take advantage of it, why not let them take advantage of it? Once these thoughts surged, it was like a wildfire that could no longer be contained. Many people suddenly turned their heads and looked in the direction of the emperor. Their eyes shone like that of wild beasts. In the next moment, they had already charged forward like a pack of mad dogs. I am not dead yet. Who dares to act rashly? With me here in Tianxiang Empire, who dares to rebel? Suddenly, a loud roar rang out. The emperor had awoken from his stupor. His eyes were like lightning, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. He stood upright on the back of his horse and looked at everyone with disdain. He was still as dignified and solemn as he was in the past. Under the pressure of his aura, the surrounding soldiers did not dare to look him in the eye. All of them quietly took 2 steps back, and some of them even lowered their weapons. Even the second prince could not help but turn pale. The sword in his hand fell to the ground with a clang, and his limbs trembled slightly. When his father's sharp eyes landed on his face, he could not help but panic and avoid his father's gaze. His legs went soft, and he actually took 3 steps back. Yang Dan, do you want to kill me? Yang Huaiyu slowly dismounted from his horse and stood upright with his hands behind his back. His hawk-like eyes glared fiercely at his son. You killed your eldest brother, and today you killed your 3rd brother. The 2 of them are your blood brothers. The 3 of you are of the same mother. They are bastards, beasts. What are you? And now, you still want to kill me? Kill your own father? I am an old tortoise, an old beast. What about you? Answer me. He took a step forward with each question, and the second prince also took a step back with a panicked expression. By the time he finished speaking, he was already 5 steps away from the emperor. The second prince's lips trembled, and his body trembled slightly. His eyes flashed, and his expression was one of panic. The malevolent expression from before had disappeared. This person was his own father. Even though he could kill his own brothers towards his own father, he could not do it and did not dare do it. What? Yang Huaiyu, Your Majesty, what's wrong? Can Yang Dan not kill you? Why can't he kill you? Do you have an extra head or an extra life than him? An elegant voice traveled with the wind. The voice was gentle, and it was neither light nor heavy. It made one feel as if they were bathing in the spring wind. Even though they were in the middle of a bloody battlefield, they still felt a little carefree. Jun Moxie. He had finally appeared at this crucial moment. Chapter 780. Everyone turned to look in the direction of the voice. In the distance, thousands of people parted to form a path. A young man dressed in green walked in with his hands clasped behind his back. His face was filled with a gentle smile, and his expression was relaxed. It was as if he had stepped into his own garden. He casually stepped into the bloody battlefield, like an immortal returning from admiring the moon. The ground was covered in fresh blood, so thick that it could even cover a person's feet. However, this young man walked over casually, and there was not a single speck of blood on his pink boots. He walked over lightly, his steps calm and unhurried. He looked at the soldiers around him, and then at the river of blood beneath his feet. Suddenly, he said in a slow voice, "Since ancient times, emperors have walked a merciless path. So what if their bloodlines kill each other? When I look at the picturesque mountains, all I see are white bones." As he spoke, he had already walked less than 10 feet away from the emperor of Tianxiang, Yang Huaiyu. His black and white eyes carried a strange, demonic elegance. He tilted his head slightly to look at the emperor who was at the end of his road. He smiled and said, "Your Majesty is in a good mood. In such a dangerous battle, under the shadow of swords and blades, amidst the rain of blood, you are still able to teach your useless son a lesson with such awe-inspiring righteousness. Truly the heart of a loving father. It makes one envious and praiseworthy. As expected, you are able to do what others are unable to do." He gently shook his head as a desolate expression appeared on his face. He let out a disappointed sigh and said, "It's a pity. I can no longer see my father. He can no longer scold me. As a son, how can I not feel pain in my heart? The tree wishes for peace, but the wind never ceases. The son wishes to be raised, but his parents do not wait for him. Your Majesty, this feeling is really hard to describe. Don't you think so? You've lost 2 sons in a row, and the last son wants to replace his father to ascend the throne. You should be able to vividly understand this commoner's suffering, right?" The emperor's eyes revealed a look of hatred. In the depths of his eyes, there was a faint trace of fear and dread. He said bitterly, "Jun Moxie, this tragedy is ultimately a matter of the imperial family. What are you doing here? And from what standpoint are you getting involved? Don't tell me. Your Jun family hasn't stirred up enough trouble yet?" Jun Moxie smiled faintly and said, "Your Majesty must be joking. How could that be? Our Jun family, when have we ever caused any trouble? 10 years ago in Tianguanlin, our Jun family had already stopped causing trouble. How would we dare to cause trouble again?" His eyelids opened, and 2 sharp rays of light shot out from his black and white eyes. His tone was gentle, but it was heavy as he asked, "Your Majesty, do you still remember Jun Wu Hui from that time?" The face of the emperor of the Tianxiang Empire was even darker than the bottom of a pot. The muscles on his face twitched, and his eyes grew increasingly gloomy. Don't lie in front of a true person. What are you trying to say? Just say it. As soon as Jun Moxie arrived, the king's imposing manner that the emperor had managed to erupt with great difficulty disappeared in just a few words. In front of Jun Moxie, he seemed a little fearful and guilty. Jun Moxie smiled lightly and said, "Your Majesty, why did you lose your temper? You scared this commoner to death." Did your Majesty ask what this commoner wanted to say? Actually, it's nothing much. I just wanted to ask you, your Majesty, how does it feel to watch your eldest son, the crown prince, get killed in front of your eyes? In the magnificent palace, in the throne room, where the most power is concentrated, to have his heart pierced by a sword? He smiled gently, but there was a sharp glint in his eyes. However, the dead are already dead. If your Majesty doesn't want to talk about it, then so be it. But what about the murderer of your eldest son, your second son, who is also your biological second son, who became a traitor because of brother two? How do you feel about that? And today, your third son was once again chopped into meat paste by the second prince in front of the two armies. This kind of feeling must be very satisfying. I believe that outsiders can understand it, right? And now, your last remaining son is about to raise the butcher's knife against his biological father, killing the emperor, killing his father, and achieving hegemony. Is it heartache? Or is it gratification? But this kind of feeling must be unforgettable, right? Perhaps your Majesty can look forward to it a little longer. This kingdom that you have ruled over is about to become a thing of the past. It will inevitably fall apart bit by bit, and you will be deserted by your people. You will become a man without a family. Do you have a little more insight into life? The emperor's entire body began to tremble. Suddenly, he widened his eyes and looked at Jun Moxie with a look of hatred. Jun Moxie, could it be that all of this was planned by you in secret? You are so vicious. You flatter me. Compared to your Majesty, I can only be regarded as a small sorcerer in the presence of a great sorcerer. The key to this series of events is nothing more than the fact that power makes people crazy. It seems that I only played a small part in it. That's all. This commoner dares not deceive your Majesty. Jun Moxie smiled faintly. It seemed as if he had just stated the most trivial matter. He tilted his head and looked at the emperor mockingly. Don't you feel that the world is very unpredictable? Don't you feel the vicissitudes of life? Ha ha! Jun Moxie, you have gone too far. The emperor gritted his teeth and roared. His eyes suddenly turned blood red. Too far? I don't think so. Your Majesty, did you feel that you had gone too far when you instructed the Bloodsword Hall to collude with the Silver Blizzard City's Shao family to murder my father and second uncle? Did you feel that you had gone too far? Jun Moxie smiled coldly. And did you feel that you had gone too far when my two brothers died because of your conspiracy? Not at all, right? How can you cut weeds without removing the roots? The Jun family has been suppressed by you to the point where they could barely breathe. But you certainly didn't feel that you had gone too far, right? The emperor's life is greater than the heavens, and his subjects are but ants. Even if they are ants with great merits, as long as they pose a threat to your throne, then they are unwarranted. So, you must eliminate them, right? Our Jun family even has to thank your Majesty for not exterminating us. Your Majesty, you are very merciful. Jun Moxie raised his head and laughed. His cold eyes looked at the emperor. The cycle of cause and effect. Retribution is not pleasant. Now that it has fallen to your Majesty, you feel that you have gone too far? Haha, this is really funny. Is it really too much? This commoner really doesn't think so. In this commoner's opinion, it's far from enough. That's the truth. You've only lost a few people, but how many heroes have lost their lives to your schemes? Countless upright men have shed their blood for the Tianxiang Empire. They were fortunate enough not to lose their lives to the enemy, but to lose their lives in the hands of their loyal monarch. Don't they think it's too much? Jun Moxie walked over step by step. His aura was abnormally heavy and oppressive. It was as if even the air had stopped flowing, and everyone felt as if they were suffocating. Do you feel that it was too much just now? Not counting, the truly excessive ones are coming. Yang Huayu today, you will definitely have a taste of it. Jun Moxie's handsome face suddenly became incomparably sinister. He suddenly shouted, Yang Dan, what are you waiting for? Kill this old bastard in front of you, and you will ascend to the throne. As long as you kill this old bastard with your own hands, you will be able to sit on the throne. I said it. The second prince, Yang Dan, was startled awake by this shout. He couldn't help but raise his head and stare at his father. His eyes were filled with greed and desire. He paused for a moment, then laughed sinisterly. He stuck out his tongue and lightly licked his lips. His eyes became redder and redder as he suddenly shouted, Many thanks to Jun Sunshao for your appreciation. Father, please don't blame this child for being unfilial. It is you who has forced me too hard. You're already at the end of the road. Why don't you just grant this child's wish? He bent down and picked up a long sword from the ground. He took 2 large steps forward, but his face revealed a struggling and hesitant expression. The feelings he had for his father and son over the years were fighting fiercely in his heart. His face was covered in cold sweat, but in the end, the crazy desire for power prevailed. The temptation of the throne of a monarch who could rule over the world and rule over the 4 seas was too great. Yang Dan roared and suddenly raised his sword. He closed his eyes and slashed down crazily. Pooh! Warm blood splattered on the second prince's face. He opened his eyes again and saw his father looking at him with a heartbroken and despairing expression. His own long sword was embedded in his father's shoulder. At this moment, Yang Dan's body began to tremble. The emperor had never imagined that the ending of his life would be to watch his 3 sons kill each other. Then, he would be killed by his last remaining son, his own son. At this moment, the pain in his heart had reached its peak. Seeing his son's sword land on his body, he didn't even have the thought of dodging. He only looked at the twisted face in front of him, his eyes filled with despair. This is my son, my own son, and he, for the sake of his desire, for the sake of the throne, wants to kill me. He is killing me, killing his own father. Blood splattered everywhere. The second prince exerted force in his hand and lifted the sword that was embedded in his shoulder. His body suddenly trembled, and a crazy desire for power appeared in his eyes. He roared, You old bastard, why aren't you dead yet? Why aren't you dead yet? Hurry up and die. Go and die. Ah! He screamed crazily and slashed down crazily again. He screamed and slashed, his face filled with madness and fanaticism. Blood flowed freely, and pieces of flesh splattered on his body. But he didn't seem to care. At this moment, he only wanted to kill the person in front of him, the last obstacle in his way to the throne. Chapter 781. After a long while, Yang Huayu's corpse was almost unrecognizable. Only then did the second prince stop, panting heavily. He threw away the blood-stained sword with a clang and panted heavily. The surroundings were completely silent. Everyone stared in shock at this prince who had crazily hacked his own father to death in front of everyone. Their eyes were filled with incredulity. The second prince's body suddenly trembled. His eyes slowly regained some focus. He suddenly opened his arms and roared crazily. Ha ha! He is dead. This old bastard is finally dead. Did you see that? Did you see that? From today onwards, I am the emperor. I am the emperor. I am finally the emperor. Ha ha! Maniacal laughter, hysterical laughter, echoed in the surroundings. Yes, you're the emperor. I will keep my words. Come, I will bring you to sit on the throne that you have been dreaming of for a long time. Jun Moxie looked at him mockingly. Good. There's one here. The second prince laughed crazily. He suddenly broke into a run and ran towards the emperor's carriage. In the carriage, there was a dragon throne. His Majesty the Emperor was sitting on it. The second prince ran over, panting. He used his hands and feet to climb up the carriage. He roared, Get lost! Get lost! Did you not see that? I am the emperor. I am the emperor. I am the emperor who rules over the world. Ha ha! He finally climbed up and sat on the throne. He touched it and looked around. He laughed crazily and patted the armrest of the dragon throne. His face was crazy and proud. How is it? The feeling of sitting on the dragon throne? Is it satisfying? A voice asked mockingly. Satisfying? Ah, ha! How can it not be satisfying? Of course it is satisfying. It is too satisfying. It is so satisfying. For this throne, I have been dreaming for more than 30 years. Emperor. Ah, the throne. I am finally the emperor. The second prince laughed crazily. Since it is satisfying, come down. June Moxie suddenly appeared in front of him. I have fulfilled my promise. You have already sat on this chair. I sat on it for real. No, I am the emperor. I want to sit forever. I won't go down even if I die. The second prince's eyes were red as he roared hysterically. But I only promised to let you sit on it once. I didn't plan to let you sit on it forever. June Moxie looked at him as if he was looking at a corpse. Get down here. At this moment, a bugle horn sounded from afar. An unusually majestic voice rang out. Prince Equivalent has brought his crown prince here to rescue the king and quell the rebellion. Everyone put down your weapons. Those who surrender will not be killed. Grand Preceptor Li has led his troops to rescue the king and assist King Pingding to quell the rebellion. Everyone, put down your weapons. Those who surrender will be spared from death. Drums beat, horns sounded, and the sound of horse hooves came from all directions like a tsunami. King Equality? What was he doing here? Could it be that he also wanted to be the emperor? No, this throne is mine. It belongs to me alone. Whoever tries to fight with me will die. Kill him for me. Kill him. Oh, Emperor, you are not worthy. The second prince was still clamoring, but Junimo Xie had already grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up like a little chick. With a casual toss, the second prince's entire body flew 3 to 400 zhang like he was riding on the clouds, landing heavily on the ground. The blood on the ground splattered everywhere. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The second prince had already lost a lot of his qi and blood because of his sensual pleasures. His physical strength was not even comparable to that of an ordinary youth. After being thrown by Jun Dashao, he was lucky that he did not die. It seemed impossible for him to stand up with his own strength. Guards, capture this lawless traitor who slaughtered his own brothers and father and present him to the Prince of Equality. Everyone else, lay down your weapons. Anyone who disobeys will be punished with the same crime and killed without mercy. The person who shouted this shocked everyone even more. This person was actually young Master Li Yuran. He had single-handedly assisted the second prince to achieve great things, instigated the second prince to kill the first prince, and was the most beneficial supporter in seizing the throne. What was going on? The change in the scene before his eyes was so strange. This was too unimaginable. The Prince of Equality's subordinates rushed over from all directions with the force of Mount Tai. Originally, both sides had no fighting strength, no fighting spirit, and would collapse at the slightest touch. The outcome was decided in an instant. The Prince Equivalent's crown prince, Yang Mo, looked at Jun Moxie standing in the middle of the rebel army. His eyes were filled with excitement and gratitude. All of this was originally impossible, but it was this elder brother Mo Xie who had single-handedly destroyed the Tianxiang dynasty that Yang Huaiyu had once ruled, and even helped him and his son to be together. Jun Moxie smiled and winked at him. Now is not a good time for the two of them to talk. In the distance, Li Yuran's white clothes fluttered in the wind. She had already come down from her high chair and was calmly walking towards Jun Moxie. Jun Mo Xie smiled and went up to meet them. The enmity had been settled, and it was time to get away. The chaotic situation had reached an extreme point. No one had seen, or perhaps no one had noticed, that Jun Moxie and Li Yuran had disappeared without a trace. Aristocratic Hall. Manager Tang Yuan was flabbergasted as he looked at these two people who he had thought would never walk together in his lifetime. Jun Moxie and Li Yuran. In Tang Yuan's mind, as long as these two people met, they would either ridicule each other, or they would start a fight. But now they were walking side by side as if they were good friends. How could Fatty Tang not be taken aback. Tang Yuan stared blankly at the two of them before raising his head to look at the sky, as if trying to see if the sun had risen from the west today. He then rubbed his eyes with all his might before letting out a strange cry. He fiercely sucked in a breath of air, causing his fat belly to tremble up and down a few times like rolling waves. Finally, he spoke with great difficulty. "I'm really not dreaming. How did you two end up together?" June Moxie could not help but laugh. "Why? Is it strange?" Fatty Tang opened his mouth and looked like he was going crazy. "How can it not be strange? How did you two?" Li Yuran also laughed. "Tang Yuan, there are some things that may not be true even if you see it with your own eyes. Just like today, I can walk into the aristocratic hall with the third young master. But do you know that I don't have the slightest confidence that I'll be able to walk out alive?" Tang Yuan opened his eyes wide. He sighed in relief and said, "That's good. That's good." Even with Li Yuran's self-restraint, he couldn't help but roll his eyes when he heard these words. "This fatty is too unrestrained. Is it worth it for you to be so happy when you hear that my life is in danger?" June Moxie looked at Li Yuran with a smile and said, "Fatty, you come too." He took the lead and walked upstairs after saying that. Tang Yuan complied and followed behind him. Li Yuro was the last. His eyes were filled with a plump buttocks that took up 2/3 of the corridor. The stairs under his feet creaked, and he couldn't help but worry that the stairs would be crushed by Fatty Tang's weight. Tang Yuan's weight had actually decreased by a lot. After June Moxie had helped him lose weight, Tang Yuan's weight had been maintained at 200 pounds for a few days. Then it had slowly rebounded and finally stabilized at less than 300 pounds. If it had been before, that buttocks would have occupied 2/3 of the corridor and would have been filled with fat. Of course, Tang Yuan was very satisfied with this outcome. Sun Xiaomei was also very satisfied, sitting down on the chair in a daze. Tang Yuan looked at June Moxie on the main seat and then looked at Li Yuran opposite him. He scratched his head and asked in confusion, "Boss, what's the matter?" June Moxie sighed. "Kid, you've fallen into a tender nest and never come out again. You've taken Sun Xiaomei, haven't you?" Tang Yuan was instantly beaming with joy, and his fat face was filled with the color of youth. He grinned and said, "Third young master knows me the best. But we're engaged, so isn't it reasonable? Is it strange?" June Mo snorted and said, "Then you'd better hurry up with serious matters. If that little fatty comes out before you've even gotten married, that would be bad. I reckon that father-in-law of yours won't let you off either." "Of course, in the next 2 or 3 months, the date has already been set." Tang Yuan rolled his eyes and said, "But I know what I'm doing. It won't happen. Thank you for your concern, boss. By the way, your gift can't be too shabby. Don't look at me as the god of fortune. Compared to you, boss, I'm just a little rich." The three laughed at the same time. Li Yuran smiled at June Moxie and said lightly, "Are leaving? Have you decided?" Before June Moxie could answer, Tang Yuan was already anxious and stood up. "Leaving? Where are you going? What are you going to do? Where are you leaving? When are you coming back? Don't tell me you can't miss my good thing." "Fatty, sit down. I'm here to talk to you about this." June Moxie smiled and said to Li Yuran, "Yes, I'm preparing." "So you're worried? You're very conflicted." Li Yuran smiled and tapped her fingers on the table. "You're considering whether it's better to kill me or to keep me. If you keep me, will that little Emperor Yang Mo you've appointed be able to control me?" "That's right." June Moxie smiled with some appreciation. "I'm considering this matter. It's indeed very conflicted." Li Yuran was silent for a moment. She slowly stood up and walked to the window. She said lightly, "When you suddenly disappeared a few days ago, I guessed that you went to take revenge. So, I immediately arranged this matter. Because if you don't come back, everything will be over. But if you can come back, then it means that the remaining 6 saints have all died in your hands. You definitely won't leave any loose ends. But if this happens, the June family will have to leave." Li Yuran looked out of the window and said with a sigh, "I don't know what method you used to kill the 6 saints, but you did succeed. But because of this, your path is getting narrower and narrower. You're only left with the Tion Fa forest. If you don't leave, you'll definitely die. But if you leave, you definitely won't be willing to leave with regrets. And you won't be willing to let all your previous arrangements go to waste. So, the second prince's rebellion this time is a whole month ahead of my original plan. Consider it a big gift from me, Li Yuran, before you leave. Chapter 782. What you're worried about is nothing more than that little rascal, Yang Mo. In other words, what you're worried about isn't Yang Mo, but that you don't want your previous arrangements to be destroyed by me. That's all, Li Yuran said in a low voice. With my, Li Yuran's intelligence, nobody can control me. Yang Mo, or his father, the Prince of Equality, Yang Huainong, none of them can. They're not worthy. He raised his head slightly and looked into the distance. But I'm willing to be controlled by them. Do you understand what I'm saying? Jun Moxie nodded. Looks like you've recognized yourself. That's right. The two of us have always walked two different paths. I don't know what you're pursuing, but what I, Li Yuran, seek is nothing more than a life of riches and glory. What I'm pursuing is only power. For the sake of supreme power, I can do anything. Why can't I be controlled by others for the sake of power? Moreover, it's only on the surface. Li Yuran smiled. All these years, I've always hidden behind the scenes, giving advice and devising strategies. But I've never appeared in front of anyone. I, Li Yuran, can be an outstanding schemer. But unfortunately, I don't have the bearing of a monarch. My position is suitable to be below one person, but above tens of thousands. That's the most suitable position for me. Is third young master satisfied with my answer? Li Yuran's eyes flickered, but she said resolutely. Jun Moxie pondered for a long time, but he didn't say a word. Li Yuran stood quietly in front of the window, not making the slightest movement. The two of them, one sitting and one standing, were like clay sculptures. The atmosphere in the room was even more oppressive. After a long time, Jun Moxie finally opened his mouth. Li Yuran, if I really want to leave, and the people from the three holy lands come again, how will you deal with it? Deal with it? What else is there to deal with? Just tell me the truth. Li Yuran heaved a sigh of relief. However, she forced a smile and said, if I tell them the truth, they won't blame me for letting you go, right? Even 6 of the 9 saints have perished at your hands, so it's obvious how powerful you are. If I insist on stopping you from leaving, then wouldn't I be a fool? Even if they're dissatisfied, they won't take it out on me, right? Jun Moxie smiled. He was very satisfied with Li Yuran's answer. He then turned to Tang Yuan, his eyes filled with deep emotions. Fatty, do you want to retreat with me? I'm afraid they'll vent their anger on you because of our relationship. Jun Moxie was worried about the only friend he recognized in this world. Fatty's temper was also the rebellious type. If he did not have the support of a strong backer, it would be easy for him to be at a disadvantage. Furthermore, he believed that the people from the 3 holy lands also knew that Fatty was his friend. If he really stayed, the danger he would face would be even greater than others. I'm not leaving. I definitely won't leave this place, Tang Yuan said straightforwardly. Then he smiled and said, I don't want to go to Tion Fa ferocious lands. Ever since I was young, I've always wanted to earn all the riches in the world. Right now, I'm in the process of achieving this goal. How can I bear to leave? How can there be any opportunities to earn money in Tion Fa ferocious lands? I definitely won't go. Fatty might have said this, but he was thinking about something else in his heart. Eldest brother, the Tion Fa forest is indeed a place where there are no opportunities to make money. But we still need to spend money to eat and drink. If I don't stay behind to support this base, what will you do? It's safe, but it doesn't mean you can eat it. Do you want to rob it? Even if you rob, there doesn't seem to be a place to rob, right? Jun Moxie was not surprised by Fatty's answer. He could even vaguely guess Fatty's true intentions. Fatty's feelings for him were undoubtedly sincere. He was willing to take the risk to stay behind for Jun Moxie's future development. On this point, Jun Moxie did not doubt Fatty's intentions. He never would, although Fatty loved money. As long as Jun Moxie said he needed money, Fatty would definitely take out all his savings immediately, leaving only a pair of underwear for himself. On the other hand, Fatty was an extremely realistic person. He was the type of person who was content with a little bit of wealth. Although his request was definitely not a little bit of wealth, it should be the standard of a lot of wealth. But deep down, he was such a person. Jun Moxie undoubtedly advocated doing as he pleased and doing as he pleased. On the other hand, what Fatty Tang Yuan pursued was another form of doing as he pleased and doing as he pleased. Fatty loved excitement, enjoyment, and beautiful women. He especially loved the thrill of using money to kill people. He called it the greatest thrill. Moreover, this fellow was extremely lazy. Back then, Jun Moxie had given him a set of martial arts to practice. But other than the one time Jun Moxie had run through it for him, he had never practiced it again. He did not even have the thought of practicing it even once. If he allowed Fatty to follow him to Tian Fa Forest, then it was tantamount to robbing Fatty of all the fun in his life. Therefore, Jun Moxie had only asked casually, let him continue on the path that he had chosen. Everyone had their own destiny. This was something that could not be forced. He could help his brother clean up the mess, but he could not choose the path for him. If he forced himself to choose for others, regardless of his standpoint, regardless of his starting point, it would be beyond the bounds of propriety. For example, a long life, unparalleled martial arts. Some people would desperately pursue these things, but some people would completely disdain them. Fatty was such a person, and so was Li Yuran. There was no other reason. Everyone pursued different things. It could be glory and splendor, wealth and rank, or the power to control everything. Or perhaps it could be the imperial power that many people would kill each other for. But in Jun Mo Xie's heart, all of these things were like weeds. Everyone had their own standpoint and their own values. That was all. Jun Moxie was silent for a while and said, everyone has their own aspirations. Since you have made this decision, I will not force you. Later, I will ask Hai Chin Feng and Song Shang for their opinions. If they are willing, let them stay and accompany you. You won't suffer too much a loss in the Tianxiang city or even in this continent with these two experts around. Tang Yuan's eyes lit up, but he agreed without saying anything. Hai Chin Feng and Song Shang had already reached the level of Superior Supreme. With these two great experts keeping watch, most things would go smoothly. And these two people were the spies that Jun Moxie had arranged to stay in the continent. However, Jun Moxie's words were not only for Tang Yuan to hear, but also for Li Yuran. Li Yuran smiled and said, Third young master, you can rest assured. I, Li Yuran, may not be a good person, but fortunately, no matter what I do, I always have a plan in mind. Jun Moxie smiled meaningfully and said, Well said, you have a plan in mind. This is also one of the reasons why I did not kill you. He paused for a while and said, I will explain to the Prince of Equality and his son about your matter. I believe that they will not abandon a talented person like young Master Li. Li Yuran's expression changed, and she said solemnly, Then, thank you very much. Jun Moxie's words carried a lot of weight. With Li Yuran's intelligence and the Li family's strength, it would not be too difficult for her to rise in Tianxiang's officialdom and occupy a position. But it was believed that she would never truly enter the core position of power, because the Prince of Equality and his son had always been on Jun Moxie's side. And in the eyes of outsiders, Li Yuran's family and the Jun family were not compatible at all. In fact, they had always been enemies. This was undoubtedly Li Yuran's biggest weakness. Even if Li Yuran's plot to kill Yang Huaiyu and his sons could be said to have made a great contribution to the Prince of Equality and his son, it was just icing on the cake. As long as there was a word from Jun Daxiao, all the contributions would be for naught. Similarly, now that Jun Moxie had said it with certainty, it could also make Li Yuran's biggest worry disappear without a trace. And it would become a great thing. This would be of immeasurable help to Li Yuran's future career. Oh, that's right. Third young master, if you really want to live in seclusion in the Tianfa forest, outsiders will naturally not be able to enter. But, although we can't touch the Shin beasts in the Tianfa forest, those rare medicinal herbs, and, our aristocratic hall will still continue to operate. The profits will still be the same as before. You get 90%, and I get 10%. Fatty Tang laughed evilly and quickly thought of a new plan to make money. If his plan was approved by June Moxie, then the Tian Fa forest would henceforth become Fatty's personal cornucopia. This was a direct monopoly, an unquestionable monopoly. Although June Moxie would still get 90%, the remaining 10% would be more than enough for Fatty to become the continent's richest man. June Dashao would have to separate himself from the human race in the future. June Moxie smiled and said, "You don't need to worry about this. You can rest assured that I already have a plan. The ratio can't be 90% for you, 60% for me, 30% for you, and 10% for Yang and Mo. That would be better. Otherwise, the royal family won't be able to get any soup if you just eat the meat. Sooner or later, they'll confiscate your family's assets. You can't always be under my protection." Tang Yuan was overjoyed. Even Li Yuran couldn't help but reveal a sincere look of envy on her face. Then, her face turned into ecstasy. This was a huge piece of cake. Even if the Tianxiang royal family only owned 10% of the profits, it would still be extremely generous. In fact, it would be enough to make the Tianxiang Empire richer than the other countries. In fact, it could even make the Tianxiang Empire the first unified country in the continent if it was used properly. When that time came, Li Yuran would have even more space to show off his skills. Whether it was the southern or northern expeditions, or the various domestic undertakings, everything would be carried out smoothly. Leaving his name in the annals of history was a sure thing. Chapter 783. Well, I really have to go. Perhaps the two of you can discuss some other matters. June Moxie smiled as he looked at Li Yuran. Before we part, I'll tell you the truth. I never intended to kill you from the beginning. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought you here. I know. Besides, I've never been a person willing to take risks. Li Yuran smiled gratefully and said in a low voice, "Although I believe that you won't need me for anything in the future, I still want to say this. If there's a need, Li Yuran, will spare no effort. Just for today's words." June Moxie laughed heartily and turned around to go downstairs. Behind him, Li Yuran's bitter words could be heard. "Third young master, I hope you take good care of Raimu." June Moxie's body couldn't help but pause, and he sighed deeply. Tang Yuan's voice carried a sobbing tone. "Third young master, if I miss you, I'll go to the Tian Fa forest to find you. You mustn't let those big tigers eat me. My meat is still too greasy and not tasty." At this moment, the streets were in a state of martial law. Groups of soldiers were lined up in neat formations, patrolling back and forth. There were still several places in the city where smoke was rising in spirals. But the previous noisy scene of battle cries had disappeared without a trace. June Moxie walked slowly on the streets, but no one dared to question him. When he returned home, he was surprised to find that the excited Prince Equivalent and his family were already waiting for him in the June residence. The Emperor Yang Huayu's family, who wielded the power of the Tianxiang imperial family, had been wiped out in the last 3 days. At present, only the Prince Equivalent, Yang Huainong, and his son, as well as Princess Raimu, had the bloodline of the imperial family. The country couldn't be without a monarch for even a day. Princess Raimu was ultimately a woman. It was only natural for the Prince Equivalent to ascend the throne. No one would object. Besides, the Emperor's family of 4 had killed each other. No one would criticize them. June Moxie said a few words to Master Wang Pingding. He especially mentioned the Dugu family, the Tang family, Li Yuran, and the others. Now, Yang Huainong and his son looked at June Moxie as if they were looking at a deity. Naturally, they would agree to his request without any hesitation. It could be said that Tianxiang Kingdom now had the backing of a super aristocratic family. On top of that, they might have to avoid the most dangerous place in the world, the Tian Fa forest. Even if there was no substantial assistance, this would be a great help to public opinion. How could Yang Huainong and his son disobey any of June Moxie's instructions? Not to mention the fact that both sides had a very harmonious relationship. The little devil, young Mo, seemed to be the third shopkeeper of June Moxie's aristocratic hall. In addition, the June family and the Silver Blizzard City had basically established an in-laws relationship. The magnificent Jewel Hall of the Silver Blizzard City was located in the Tianxiang Kingdom. Naturally, it would become one of the Tianxiang Kingdom's allies for Yang Mo and his son, who had a hot pancake in their cold hands. This was an indescribable joy. This was equivalent to gold ingots ceaselessly falling from the sky, and it smashed both father and son to the point they were dizzy. They were simply happy to the point they didn't know what to do. However, there were many matters to attend to at the moment. So after exchanging greetings for a while, Junimo very considerately ordered them to leave, and the soon-to-be emperor father and son hurriedly took their leave. June Moxie ordered everyone to speed up their preparations for the evacuation. Then, he returned to his own courtyard. He still had one more thing to do, to wake up Princess Raimu. In the bedroom, Princess Raimu was still quietly lying on the bed. Under the miraculous hands of June Moxie, she had recovered very quickly. Her previous external injuries were basically no longer a problem. Only the bone injury on her knee and the extravasated blood in her brain had yet to be removed. Princess Raimu had now become June Moxie's biggest hot potato. First, her parents had turned against each other. Then, her mother had died in her father's hands. Then, Uncle Yi, who was closest to her, had died because of his lover's death. Now, her remaining relatives, her father and 3 brothers, had also killed each other in a matter of days. This proud daughter of the heavens had now become the most pitiful orphan girl. She had no relatives to turn to. What would she do if she was really saved? But if she was not saved and directly brought to the Tian Fa forest, what was that called? Although the emperor's family was not killed by June Moxie himself, in the end, all of them died under June Moxie's plan. If not for the fact that young Master June had purposely arranged for them to kill their brothers and father, it was inevitable that he would have personally taken action and used the most vicious methods to kill them. But even though these people were unpardonable and deserved to be punished, they were still Princess Raimu's relatives. The simplest way at the moment was to kill Raimu with a palm and send her to the underworld so that she would not suffer in the human world anymore. But when he thought of Empress Murong Xiuxiu's last wish before he passed away, the simplest way became the most impossible choice. But it was not a solution to be in stalemate like this. As for where to go, let her make the decision herself. June Moxie looked at the sleeping Princess Raimu on the bed and decided to do so. Now, although Princess Raimu was sleeping all day, her body functions were much better than before she was injured under the nourishment of the spiritual energy. She should be able to bear the impact. There were many complicated things in front of him, and he could not delay any longer. June Moxie finally decided to save her. As he thought about it, he gently covered the top of Princess Raimu's head with his spiritual energy. A faintly discernible purple spiritual energy was triggered from June Moxie's hand and instantly entered Princess Raimu's head. It integrated into her blood vessels and slowly dissolved the blood clots in her brain. Under June Moxie's careful control, the blood clots in Raimu's brain were dissolved by the purple spiritual energy bit by bit. Then, they turned into dust particles and completely integrated into her blood vessels. Then, with the circulation of her blood vessels, when they left her brain, June Moxie again used his spiritual energy to separate the dust-like waste from her blood vessels and force them out through the pores of her skin. Under June Mo Xie's precise control, everything was done with ease, and everything was done in an orderly manner. Princess Ling Ming felt as though she had just woken up from a long and painful nightmare from which she had finally woken up. He slowly opened his eyes. The light in the room was not very strong, and he actually felt a stab of pain in his eyes. "Where is this?" "You are." Princess Raimu looked at June Moxie in a daze. Suddenly, she opened her eyes. "June Moxie? Where's my mother? Where's my mother and Uncle Yi? Are they okay? Where are they now?" She suddenly sat up from the bed as she spoke. Her actions had affected the bone in her knee, and she had felt a burst of pain. However, she didn't seem to feel it at all. Instead, she anxiously grabbed June and Mosie's clothes. Princess, your mother, and your uncle Yi. June Moxie looked at Princess Raimu's frightened eyes and could not help feeling sad in his heart. He said in a low voice, "Both of them have passed away, and now they are buried. Rest in peace." Princess Ling Ming muttered those words in a daze, seemingly unable to comprehend the meaning of those words. She stared blankly in front of her. Suddenly, she recalled what had happened before she fainted. Her entire body trembled, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. She shouted, "Mother! Uncle Yi, you are so cruel. Why did you leave me like this? Why did you leave your little Meng, like this? Why didn't you take me with you? Why did you leave me in this cruel world?" Halfway through her words, her tears flowed down uncontrollably. Suddenly, she could not catch her breath and fell straight down. Jun Dashao acted as a firefighter again. He injected spiritual energy into Princess Raimu again. Finally, she woke up again. She leaned on Jun Moxie's leg and cried loudly. After a long time, she finally asked in a hoarse voice, "The murderer, is it him?" Jun Moxie nodded silently and said in a low voice, "It's him." Princess Raimu's whole body trembled, and her eyes revealed sincere despair. She murmured, "It's him? It's really him. Then, what should I do? What should I do?" "You don't need to think about this anymore." Jun Moxie took a deep breath and said, "This has been avenged. Why has it been avenged?" Princess Raimu murmured and repeated. Suddenly, she straightened her body in shock. She looked at Jun Moxie with her big, tearful eyes without blinking, and said as if she was dreaming, "Avenged? You mean, Jun Moxie swallowed his saliva. For the first time, he felt that some words were not appropriate to say. It's true that it has been avenged. The murderer and his 3 sons are all dead. As for you, you have been in a coma for nearly 2 months. The murderer and his 3 sons are all dead." Princess Raimu was stunned. Now, she was like a yes man. Every time Jun Moxie said a sentence, she would murmur a sentence. After a long time, she finally understood. The so-called murderer and his 3 sons. Were they her father and her 3 brothers? Dead? Princess Raimu's body suddenly trembled violently. She asked weakly in a hoarse voice, How did they die?" She gradually came to her senses. She knew that Jun Moxie would definitely not joke with her at such a time and on such a matter. It's roughly like this. Just a few days ago, the second prince, Yang Dan, suddenly rose in revolt and killed the first prince. Then he rebelled. The emperor and the third prince sent troops to suppress him. Both sides fought, and the second prince killed the third prince in front of the 2 armies. Then he killed His Majesty the Emperor, Yang Huaiyu. Finally, the second prince was captured by Prince Equivalent and was beheaded as an apology to the world. Jun Moxie said concisely. In the end, he scratched his head in embarrassment. Looking at Princess Raimu, who was listening intently, he said, "Of course, I played a part in this matter. I was the one who encouraged the second prince to rebel. I, Jun Moxie, could be said to have single-handedly planned and added fuel to the fire. I believe you understand the reason. It's for revenge. I want to avenge my father, my second uncle, my 2 brothers, and the countless innocent souls who died because of this." Princess Raimu's eyes gradually filled with shock. She even forgot to cry. She looked at him in shock and did not make a sound. Chapter 784. Looking at Princess Raimu, staring at him blankly, as if she didn't hear him clearly, Jun Moxie sighed and explained everything from the beginning to the end. From the death of Yi Gahan and Murong Xiao, to the Tomb of Lovers, to the encouragement of the second prince, to the grudges, he told her everything. Princess Raimu finally understood. She closed her eyes miserably, and 2 lines of tears flowed down. Her father sent a killer to kill her mother, which was equivalent to killing her uncle Yi. From this point of view, they were her enemies. But no matter what, he was still her father. After that, Jun Moxie plotted to make her father and 3 brothers kill each other and die a violent death. From this point of view, It could be said that regardless of June Mo's starting point, he had indirectly avenged her. But he had also plotted against her father. No matter how emotional they were, in terms of blood, he was still her father. Princess Lingming was at a complete loss. She panicked. What should I do now? Thinking of this, she raised her head in panic and looked at June Moxie. She said miserably, June's son Xiao. June Moxie, what should I do? Who can tell me? What should I do? Can you tell me? Looking at Princess Raimu, June Moxie couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The person in front of him was the only remaining princess of the royal family. She was the favored daughter of the heavens. She had a distinguished identity and was in the prime of her life. She was extremely beautiful. Such a woman should have enjoyed all the glory and favor and had a smooth life. But she had such a hard life. She had grown up since her childhood, except for her mother and an outsider like Yi Guhan. No one had given her the slightest bit of affection or warmth. She had grown up with great difficulty, but her mother had died tragically at the hands of her father. She had died in front of her. Yi Guhan, who had loved her the most, had become disheartened, and her father, who was her enemy, was also killed in the power struggle. The princess of a kingdom had actually become an orphan. Now, when one looked up at the vast world, there was actually not a single relative who could not be tolerated by the country, the family, and the relatives. Other than June Moxie in front of her, there was no one else she could rely on. As for June Moxie, to a certain extent, he was her father's murderer. The fate of the world was so bizarre that it was actually like this. All these unforeseen events had happened to the same person. How could it be just the vicissitudes of life? On her deathbed, your mother entrusted you to me. June Moxie thought for a while and said, also, before Yigahan died, he asked me to take good care of you. June Moxie found it difficult to say these words. He even felt a little awkward, killing her father and brother and then taking care of her. What the hell was this? Why do I feel like I'm more of a bully than a bully? But June Moxie had to say it. He also did not want to face Princess Raimu. Not only did Princess Raimu feel uncomfortable, but he also felt uncomfortable in his heart. No matter how evil the emperor was, his blood relationship with Princess Raimu could not be erased. However, this was what Murong Xiao and Yi Gahan entrusted before they died. It was their deepest care for Raimu. June Xia also couldn't erase this kind of sentiment. So, he set it out and let Princess Raimu make the decision herself. If Raimu chose to leave, June Moxie would naturally arrange everything for her. But if she chose to stay, June Moxie would not object. Just take it as the last thing he did for Murong Xiao and Yi Gahan. As for what happened in the future, let nature take its course. Who could say for sure? Princess Raimu lowered her head. Her face was haggard. Her feelings towards June Moxie went from disgust to curiosity, then to admiration, and then to gratitude and mysteriousness for the knife that saved her life. Slowly, it turned into vague feelings between a man and a woman. If it was before this, she would have been extremely shy and happy to hear this news. But now, she did not feel happy at all. Her heart had been filled with all kinds of things. From having everything to having nothing, the time was too short. For her, it was actually just a moment. Because before her mother died, she still had everything. Before her mother died, she had already fallen into a coma. When she woke up, everything was gone. Things remained the same, but people change. It was like waking up and the whole world changed. This feeling was even a bit like the legendary time travel. When one woke up, they had traveled from Earth to the Xian continent. But Princess Raimu had much more sorrow than a time traveler. It was really unbearable. Raimu, listen to me. You have to pull yourself together. Maybe I shouldn't say this at this time, but time is really pressing. I hope you can make a decision as soon as possible. Because of some reasons, once the sun rises, the June family will completely evacuate from Tianxiang. We will enter the Tian Fa forest and stay away from the secular world. June Moxie said, if you don't have any other arrangements, you can choose to come with us. If you wish to stay behind, I can also speak to the King of Equality and the others and let them take good care of you. The king of equality is a loyal person, so he will definitely treat you well. June Moxie slowly explained the specific situation that the June family had to face. Then he said softly, I can only give you half a night to think about it. I'm sorry. Princess Raimu's pretty face inexplicably turned red. But she resolutely said, June Moxie, I really don't want to stay in this ugly and sinful world anymore. I sincerely hope that I can go to a place where no one knows me and live the rest of my life in peace. From then on, everything in this world will have nothing to do with me. I think you can help me, right? Please don't misunderstand. I don't have any intention of pestering you. I just want to go to a place where I can live the rest of my life in peace. June Moxie grinned. He thought in his heart, a place where no one goes? Isn't this the Tion Fa forest? It's really the will of the heavens. You want me to not misunderstand and not pester you? Who are you kidding? But he pretended to hit it off and clapped his hands. It's such a coincidence. It's really the will of the heavens. Tion Fa forest just meets your requirements. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that I have any. It's really a coincidence, right? Yes, we're just taking what we need. Princess Raimu said sadly, since I'm leaving tomorrow morning, I want to burn some incense for my mother and Uncle Yi. I'm afraid there won't be many opportunities in the future. June Moxie breathed a sigh of relief and said, No problem. I'll arrange it for you right away. It'll be quick. Late at night, the grave of passion, Princess Ling Ming sincerely knelt in front of the tomb. The pain from her knee bone was tearing her heart out. Kneeling for such a long time would cause her bones to become even more unbearable. It might even cause her old injury, which had already healed, to relapse and cause permanent damage. However, she stubbornly refused everyone's kind advice and stubbornly knelt there. In front of her, incense curled and smoke rose. Countless paper money burned in the night sky, creating a hazy color. I don't regret my deep love in this life. I'm willing to wander alone. If there's still fate in the next life, I'd rather betray the heavens than betray you. Princess Ramu looked at the huge gravestone with dreary eyes and murmured, Mother, Uncle Yi, I'm leaving. Your little Ming really has to leave this place far away. I sincerely hope that you can reunite in the netherworld and become a real husband and wife. Uncle Yi, how I look forward to little Ming being the daughter of you and mother. If there's a next life, I want to be your real little Ming I'll be obedient. Father, Mother. Suddenly, Princess Raimu understood the true meaning of her name. Little Ming wasn't this the biggest wish of her mother? To be able to reunite with Yi Gahan. To be able to reunite with her sweetheart. There was no hope in this life, only in her dreams. Therefore, her mother named her Raimu. Pet naming, this was her mother's dream, and also Uncle Ye's dream. Now, the two of them were lying under this cold gravestone. Therefore, Princess Raimu called out from the bottom of her heart, Father, Mother! She was her mother's only daughter. Calling out Father was tantamount to fulfilling the most desired dream of her mother and Uncle Yi. In the next life, I still want to be your daughter, no matter how poor or humble I am. But it's my most desired dream to have such parents in my life. The night wind whimpered, rolling up the unburned paper ashes, fluttering in the air. It seemed that Murong Xiao and Yi Gahan were nodding with relief and reluctantly waving goodbye to their daughter, wishing her a safe and happy life. If there's a chance, little Ming will come back to see you. Father, Mother, Ming is going. Princess Raimu looked at the gravestone in front of her with infinite reluctance. She almost looked back 3 times with every step, crystal clear tears constantly flowing down her beautiful face. The wind whistled and gradually grew louder. The branches and leaves of the pine and cypress trees in the grave of passion were blown by the wind at the same time, swaying in the shadows and making rustling sounds. Princess Raimu clearly heard that the rustling sounds were clearly her mother and Uncle Yi gently looking at her back, gently telling her over and over again, Ming have a safe journey. Take good care of yourself. Don't let us worry. Princess Ling Ming suddenly turned around. Her eyes were filled with tears as she used all her strength to shout, "Father! Mother!" She suddenly knelt on the ground and cried herself hoarse early in the morning. Outside the Jun family's mansion, all the ministers of the entire Tianxiang kingdom, under the leadership of the new emperor, Yang Huainong, gathered here to see off the Jun family. All the male and female members of the Dugu family were also gathered here. Old man Dugu Zong Hung stood upright, holding the old lady's arm. Dugu Wu Di led the heroes and legends to the front of his 7 nephews. Everyone had a look of deep reluctance on their faces. The corners of the old lady's eyes were already filled with tears. On the other side, Li Yuran and Tang Yuan stood together, one fat and one thin. The 2 experts, Hai Chan Feng and Song Shang, stood behind Tang Yuan, looking at the gate of the Jun family with a look of reluctance. Chapter 785. After some reluctance, Dugu Zong Hung shouted, "Don't be so wishy-washy. What's the use? It's not like we're parting forever. You can come back when you want to. Let's go, let's go. Time is of the essence. The enemy could come at any time. What are you waiting for?" Everyone chuckled. Jun Mo, Xie, straightened his body and faced the crowd. "Everyone present here is a friend of my Jun family. My Jun family was forced to retreat this time because we had no other choice. I believe that we will make a comeback one day. Everyone, if there's anything you need, you can send an eagle to inform us. As long as it's within our capabilities, we will not refuse." After saying this, Jun Moxie cupped his hands. "Everyone take care." Everyone returned the gesture. "Take care, Master Jun Sun Shao. Take care, Grandpa Jun. Take care, Third Master Jun." Jun Moxie laughed and looked at Tang Yuan one last time. "Fatty, the future richest man in Xian. Just wait for your fortune to strike it rich." Ha! Jun Tian and Jun Wui cupped their hands and bid farewell to everyone. Under Jun Moxie's command, the Xian beasts were already ready, and everyone mounted them one by one. Then, Long Crane let out a long roar and took the lead. Like an arrow chasing after the sun, he shot into the sky like a lightning bolt. With a series of roars, thousands of flying Xian beasts rose into the sky, forming a huge flying formation. Under Jun Moxie's command, they flew a circle around Tianxiang City, then suddenly turned around and headed south. Along the way, it stirred up the wind and thunder. Everyone raised their heads to look at the Jun family as they left. Everyone had a pensive look on their faces. This god of war family that had protected Tianxiang for decades had finally left. Even though they were retreating, it was a glorious retreat. Since ancient times, there had never been such an awe-inspiring way of retreating in the sky. Dugu Xiaoyi cried into Dongfang when Xine's arms. The wind and thunder finally subsided, and the dust that had been stirred up in all directions gradually settled down. The Jun family silhouettes had long since disappeared from the sky. In Dongfang, a ray of sunlight shone out. Boundless radiance. After returning to the imperial palace, Emperor Yang Huainong immediately issued imperial edicts. From now on, the Jun family's mansion would become the god of war's manor, and no one would be allowed to enter. No one can move any of the settings inside. They even sent people to clean the place regularly. No matter what time it was, they had to keep it clean. The White Commander Jun Wu Hui, the iron-blooded god of war Jun Wu Ming, and the others would be enshrined and worshipped by the entire Tianxiang nation. Another area would be designated for the spirit mausoleum of the Tianxiang army. The grave of the affectionate couple was designated as a forbidden area in Tianxiang's capital city. No one was allowed to enter and destroy it. Anyone who disobeyed would have their entire family executed. Apart from that, there were also dozens of other articles, and all of them were related to the Jun family. The Jun family may have been forced to retreat, but their glory in Tianxiang had reached the pinnacle. It was basically unprecedented, and there would never be anyone who could do it in the future. In the Tianfa Forest, Bear Mountain, and the rest had not stopped their previous reckless construction. The progress was quite fast, and they had already completed almost half of it. These Xian beasts were strong. Although the work was not meticulous, it was fast and sturdy enough. This saved Jun Moxie a lot of effort. When they arrived at the Tian Fa forest, while others were looking around curiously, Jun Dashao had already begun his hard work. There was nothing he could do about it. His power of earth was just too convenient for him to construct buildings. In a day, Jun Dashao hollowed out the small hill behind the Xian beasts and created a magnificent palace. At this time, the countless luminous pearls that he had plundered from a 9-nether first young master's palace were finally put to use. First, there was a wide road that could accommodate 10 carriages moving side by side. Huge stone pillars with dragons and phoenixes carved on them stood on both sides of the road. They acted as load-bearing walls that supported the entire mountain. The eyes of the dragons and phoenixes were all luminous pearls. On both sides of the road, there were many small paths. Although they were small paths, they were actually very spacious. As the path continued, it led to an extremely spacious hall. Tables, chairs, benches, and household items were all present. Around the hall, there were many smaller rooms. It looked like Jun Dashao had made up his mind not to let the 9-nether first young master's designs dominate. However, what troubled Jun Dashao now was that he did not know how to appear and disappear mysteriously like the 9-nether first young master. He had the majestic palace, but the main door had become the biggest problem. After thinking for a long time, to the point where his head was hurting, Jun Dashao finally decided to use the most traditional and ancient method, wooden door bolts. Piercing 2 holes in the stone wall, binding the door pillars, and then putting on the wooden door. This was the simplest method. Although this was already the simplest method, the workload was not small, even for young Master Jun himself. Only when young Master Jun was halfway through did he realize that this task could also be done by others. Thus, young Master Jun changed from a worker to a supervisor. It could be considered as liberated Jun Wui and his family had a hall. Old Master Jun occupied one, Dongfang, when Exen and the girls occupied the largest one, and then Jun Dashao built a private space for himself. The countless small paths at the door were the residences of the servants who came with the Jun family. There were not many servants from the Jun family who came with them. Most of them had been dismissed. However, the wealth given to any one of them was enough for them to live the rest of their lives in peace. Jun Moxie was not harsh to those who came with him. He said, "No matter if it's a man or a woman, as long as there's a match, report it to me, and I'll give you the treatment of opening another cave residence. If there's anyone who is not used to it, you can bring it up any time. The Jun family will be responsible for settling the money and sending it out of Tian Fa so that they can make a living elsewhere." After being busy for half a month, they were finally able to settle down. Bear Mountain and the rest looked at the busy Jun family, then looked at the beautiful palace built by Jun Moxie, and then went back to their own bear den. Suddenly, everything was not pleasing to the eye. That's what a home is. But ours? What's going on? The difference was too big. There was no comparison before, so I didn't feel it. But now, if the Jun family lives in a house, then we live in a shack at most. Even the rooms of the Jun family servants are better than ours. Isn't this too much? We're the dignified beast kings of Tian Fa. This is too embarrassing. After the beast kings toured the Jun family's new residence, all of them fell silent. Only the corners of their mouths were dripping with greed. After suppressing their grievances for 2 days, they finally spoke up. "Brother-in-law, we're all family. Do you think we can also live in such a house? We're all your brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law." Jun Moxie rolled his eyes and looked at this group of brothers-in-law. There was nothing he could do. The other party had already brought up the word brother-in-law. What else was there to say? He could only continue with his work. By the time the 7 brothers-in-law of the Beast King and the sister-in-law of the Snake King had happily moved into their new residence, Jun Dashao was so tired that he couldn't move. The 8 Beast Kings didn't have a brother-in-law in their eyes now that they had a new home. Who was a brother-in-law? We must properly enjoy our new residence. Looking at the huge crowd of brothers-in-law, Jun Dashao weakly announced, "From now on, Only those who have reached the first level of venerable will be able to enjoy such treatment. Those who haven't reached that level, hurry up and cultivate. Bear Mountain and the rest were the only exceptions. There would never be a next time. The first level of venerable. Even Bear Mountain and the other 8 Beast Kings of Tion Fa had not reached that level, although their physical strength had already surpassed the first level of venerable. Their actual strength had not reached that level yet. Among the Beast Kings, only Bear Mountain and Long Crane were relatively close to that level. The Beast Kings walked away with bloodshot eyes, looking at the new residents of Bear Mountain and the rest. Their eyes were filled with envy and jealousy. They really wanted to snatch it over. For the sake of obtaining such a new home, Jun Dashao's words had caused a cultivation craze in the Tion Fa forest. It lasted for a long time, if not for the fact that the venerable realm was not a profound realm that could be reached with just willpower. Jun Dashao would probably spend the rest of his life focusing on building houses. Even though he had temporarily sent away many of his brothers-in-law, Jun Moxie was still extremely busy. First, he used the power of wood to clear out a large piece of land. It had to be close to 1,000 mu of farmland. Then, he used the power of earth to flatten it and turn it into a plantation. Now that he had moved his family here, he couldn't possibly not have anything to eat, right? Although he could buy food, it seemed like he was going too far. He might as well do it himself and have enough food and clothing. But if he wanted to grow crops and vegetables, just having the land was not enough. Without water, how could he make the plants grow? So, with the help of the power of water and the help of the power of earth, he dug out a few deep wells. Then he brought in spring water from afar and created a small lake-like pond near the farmland. Everything was solved. While Jun Dashao was busy, some neighbors came to visit. In Tiannan City, General Wan was entrusted by the new emperor to deliver a lot of household items. Everything was piled up outside the Tion Fa forest. Those items were like a mountain. Jun Moxie waved his hand, and all the level 9 Xian beasts were dispatched to act as temporary movers. They moved all the items back in one go. The side effect was so many level 9 Xian beasts were dispatched at the same time, scaring General Wan out of his wits. Jun Dashao immersed himself in construction. He decorated the vicinity of the Jun family's residence like a large garden. There were food, toys, and all kinds of entertainment facilities. Even the small lake was set up with a few fishing spots for his grandfather and the rest to relax. During this period of time, Jun Dashao was really working hard. He worked hard during the day and studied formations at night. Finally, after nearly a month, he successfully laid out a 5 elements heaven-confounding formation. Jun Dashao set up this formation at the outermost area of the new Jun residence. On the day the formation was activated, the entire mountain range was instantly hidden in a thick white fog. It was so dark that one couldn't see their fingers in front of them. This caused the Xian beasts of Tion Fa to click their tongues in wonder. Bear Mountain tried it himself. He shook his buttocks and went in to test it out. All they heard was a series of rumbling thunder. Then, Bear King flew out, his whole body emitting the smell of roasted bear paws. His face was covered in dirt, and his body was trembling. This was only because the Xian Beast Kings of Tion Fa had an amazing defense. Otherwise, they would have become roasted bears. Chapter 786. Jun Dashao was frowning and thinking hard in the formation, wondering if there were any loopholes. But he didn't expect that there would be an intruder the moment the formation was set up. He rushed over to stop it, but he was a step too late. Bear King's condition seemed to be very miserable. This was probably because the Xian beasts had astonishing defenses, and Jun Dashao had stopped it in time. Otherwise, this Bear King would have become the first Tion Fa Beast King to be roasted alive by the heavenly lightning. Looking in from the outside, it was filled with white fog, and one's vision was blurry. Naturally, one couldn't see anything. But inside, it was a different scene. The blue sky was clear, and there were no clouds in the sky. It was a beautiful scenery. As for the other 3 sides, they had been sealed off by Jun Moxie with another formation. Coupled with the strength of the Tian Fa forest, it could be said to be impregnable. As for the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops, after the internal arrangements were more or less completed, Jun Moxie gave an order. Everyone left Tian Fa forest and went to the original Shui Hun Manor to set up camp. This place would be the base that Jun Moxie would expand from. The evil monarch's world would begin here. Jun Moxie activated the power of Wood crazily again, forcefully connecting the trees of this mountain range with the Tian Fa forest, turning it into his secret base. In the dead of night, the giant trees grew with a schwa 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 sound. When the sky brightened, the originally small mountain range had already turned into a primeval forest. In a single night, thousands of acres of mountain range had been devoured. There was no longer any distinction between it and the Tian Fa forest. Solitary Eagle, Feng Wan Yun, Bailey Luo Yun, and the rest were all leading the way here. Outside, Jun Moxie had also set up a mysterious formation to conceal it. At this point, all the arrangements were temporarily completed. The problem of his own safety was finally resolved. Jun Moxie could finally heave a sigh of relief. He didn't expect that it would be so troublesome for him to move to another place. When he returned to the Tian Fa forest, he saw a long crane flying into a rage. As it turned out, ever since the Crane King had his own temporary imperial residence, he treated it like a treasure. Every day, he would walk around it and observe it, taking it as a stroll. But on this day, he was furious to find out that there was a little beast that had the audacity to defecate outside the Crane King's temporary imperial residence. The Crane King was enraged. The original cave residence was just a nest. That was not all. He would do it once in a while. There was nothing to be embarrassed about. Everyone was the thick-skinned kind. As long as he lowered his head, there would be latrines everywhere. But now that he was living in such a beautiful palace, if such an indecent thing were to happen again, how could he endure it? Therefore, when the Crane King was enraged, all the mystical beasts trembled in fear. All of them prostrated themselves and accepted the Crane King's furious rebuke. Fine. Jun Dashao saw that he still had to handle this matter. Therefore, after Dashao discussed with the other beast kings, they implemented a new measure. Thousands of large toilets sprang up in the Tian Fa forest like mushrooms after the rain. The 8 great beast kings took turns to be on duty. Once every month, they would let their subordinates clean up the filth and then transport it to another empty valley. There was a 10,000 zhang cliff, and they would use it to fill in the cliff. Naturally, they would use the wheelbarrow that General Wan from South Sky City had given them. Therefore, the Xin beasts under him were in big trouble in the past 10,000 years. When had the Xin beasts ever defecated in such a proper manner? Now that they suddenly did this, it almost caused the Xin beasts to rebel. But ever since the high-ranking beast kings moved into the high-class villas, they had already accepted this graceful action. In fact, they even thought that it was a heinous crime for Xin beasts to defecate anywhere they wanted. In fact, the Eagle King even volunteered to set up a law enforcement team. Nearly 3,000 high-ranking Xin beasts patrolled the Tian Fa forest day and night. The moment they found any vile act of defecating anywhere they wanted, they would be punished according to the law. Their energy would be sealed, they would be beaten up, and they would be locked up in solitary confinement. If they found traces of feces in a certain area, but couldn't find out who was the culprit, then all the Xin beasts in the area would be punished together. Therefore, for a long period of time, the Tian Fa forest was filled with ghostly wails and wolf howls. All the Xin beasts wanted to cry, but had no tears, and they complained to the heavens. As for the natural rule of the Tian Fa forest where the strong preyed on the weak, Jun Moxie had never thought of changing it. Only in that kind of cruel competition, under the pressure of survival, would Tian Fa be able to produce strong experts. If there wasn't, then it would just be a large zoo. But after the Crane King and the Bear King discussed for a while, they still decided, even if there were battles between them, they must clean up the battlefield after the battle. Otherwise, they would be severely punished. In other words, they could eat the meat, but after eating the meat, they would have to clean up the bones. Furthermore, under Jun Dashao's instigation, all the Shin Beast clans in the Tianfa forest would have a long and drawn-out competition. In other words, once a year, all the clans would compete against each other. No deaths were allowed, but the clan that came in last would have to clean the toilets of Tianfa for the clan that came in first for a year. Who would be willing to have to deal with those smelly things for an entire year? Therefore, the enthusiasm for training in Tianfa rose once again. This kind of good atmosphere caused all the Beast Kings to be grinning from ear to ear. By the time the June family's life was back on track, more than a month had already passed. Everyone in the June family had also gradually adapted to life in their new home. Every day, Grandpa June would bring a small stool and a fishing rod to the small lake that June Moxie had opened up to fish. In his free time, he would practice martial arts. The old man's life was extremely comfortable. Even the worries of being far away from his homeland had disappeared by 80 to 90%. With his worries gone, his state of mind was naturally clear. Apart from his clear state of mind, even his cultivation had improved by a lot. Speaking of which, June Moxie had given him quite a lot of good medicine during this period of time. But the old man had too many things to worry about, whether it was the country, the family, others, or himself. Even if he had tens of thousands of divine medicines, it would not be very effective. Now that he had nothing to worry about, his state of mind was clear, and the medicine that had accumulated in his body was unleashed subtly. The old man's cultivation naturally improved a lot, and he had already climbed to the realm of Superior Supreme. The young Master June did not pay too much attention to the old man's battle prowess. Even if there was a war in the future, he would not let the old man fight. But there was another benefit to the improvement of his cultivation, and that was the increase of his lifespan. The old man had spent half his life on the battlefield, and the injuries he had sustained were no small matter. Although June Moxie had tried to treat his grandfather's injuries, he was unable to do so. Although the effects were obvious, it was still impossible for the old man to recover to his peak condition. But the old man's improvement in cultivation had also greatly increased his lifespan. This had saved the young Master June a lot of trouble. With the old man's current cultivation, living for another 100 or 200 years would not be a problem. As for June Wu-yi and his wife, they weren't living a sweet and blissful life like June Moxie had imagined. After all, this couple had a very heavy sense of responsibility. They would count on their fingers every day to calculate how many orphans had been sent to the old Shuehun Manor and how their daily lives were like. This was especially so for Han Yin Yao. Every single one of those children was on her mind. She had adopted so many children, and in just a few short days, she was able to accurately name all of them. Furthermore, she had memorized most of the children's birthdays. Furthermore, she had specially organized and recorded them so that she could prepare them at any time. Just this kind of effort alone was enough to make one sigh in admiration. Han Yin Yao had a goal in her heart, and it could be said to be her greatest wish. If all of these children could acknowledge her in their hearts and treat her as a mother, then she would be able to feel a little more comfortable in her heart. Moreover, when taking care of these children, Han Yin Yao often felt that her heart was very natural, happy, and peaceful. Therefore, no matter how dirty these children were when they were sent to her, she didn't feel the slightest bit of disgust. With June Wu-yi accompanying them in this work, the two of them did not feel lonely, nor did they feel trivial. Instead, they did their work very well. There was also something that made June Dashao even more gratified. The sadness hidden in the depths of June Wu-yi's eyes had finally disappeared completely. His originally straight back seemed to have become even straighter, and Han Yin Yao's cold and pretty face had also disappeared. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was glowing. It seemed like there was a saying that a woman's beauty was nourished by a man. As for the biggest palace that was occupied by Dongfang when Xian and the girls, there would be the sound of playing mahjong every day. That was the mahjong that June Dashao had invented. Ever since it was invented, the girls had a great time playing it. Whenever they were free, they would gather together to play around. Sometimes, even the Snake King would sneak in and join in. Guanqing Han, Dugu Xiaoyi, Han Yin Ming, Princess Raimu, Dongfang Wen Xian, and the Snake King. These 6 people became the most loyal mahjong friends. Among them, the best was actually Dugu Xiaoi. This girl had a very high comprehension in this aspect. Later on, she could actually play mahjong with her eyes closed, and there would definitely be no mistakes with her jade-like hands. She was known as the god of mahjong and was even ostracized by the others in the end. You can play with your eyes closed, and you're still so lucky. Everyone wants to win in mahjong, and it's unbearable to just lose without winning. Princess Raimu's health improved greatly, and her mood became more cheerful. With the company of her best friend, Dugu Xiaoi, her complexion naturally became better day by day. And when Xin saw that these girls were all as beautiful as flowers and jade, he had already determined that these were all his son's women, which meant that they were his daughters-in-law. Of course, he would dote on them. Now that his soul had been entrusted to him, he was no longer depressed and forced to be happy like before. During this period of time, apart from being a construction worker, Jun Daxiao also worked as a porter. Every day, a huge amount of medicinal herbs would be sent to Jun Moxie's door by the Beast Kings. Regardless of whether they were poisonous or not, precious or common, they would all be transported here. Jun Moxie did not reject any of them. Some of the more precious ones would be directly moved into the Hongjun Pagoda, and the rest of the ordinary ones would be transplanted in a medicinal garden that he had opened up. Although the former had obtained the first young master's 10,000 years of collection, it was a pity that those medicinal herbs were too precious, and their age and medicinal strength were too strong. They were all items that people coveted but did not dare to use at all. If they were used at his current level, it would basically be a waste. It would be better to make use of these local products from Tian Fa. The problem was solved smoothly. The war for seizing the heavens was carried out according to the original plan, so everything was completely fine now. I stretched my back and let out a sigh of relief. Today's life is so beautiful. Wahahaha. Oh, there's something that I need to make clear in advance. These few days, I've been desperately saving up chapters to be used during the new year so that I can spend time with my family during the new year. So, it might be very difficult for me to break out in these few days. I was lying in the hospital during the New Year '09, and I'm still desperately writing and updating the legend of Ling Tian on the eve of the New Year 10. I need to spend time with my family this year. During the few days of the new year, there will still be 2 chapters a day. Brothers and sisters, please understand. Chapter 787. Junimo Xie had opened the door to see Earthcracker running towards him while puffing and puffing. He was carrying a huge object. In fact, he had rolled it up several times. It was several feet long. The roots of the object were floating in the air, and there were lumps the size of a human head swaying in the air. In fact, it looked like it weighed nearly 500 kilograms. Jun Moxie couldn't help but be shocked when he saw it. That thing was actually a giant Chinese knotweed that was tens of thousands of years old. It turned out that when Tiger King was on duty, he found that there was a vine on the mountain that looked like some kind of medicine that his brother-in-law had mentioned. So, he mobilized hundreds of 9th-level Xian beasts to dig up almost the entire mountain before they completely dug it out. Then, he couldn't wait to carry it and present it as a treasure. This was the Earthcracker who had a breakthrough. Otherwise, an ordinary person wouldn't be able to carry such a heavy object. A giant Chinese knotweed that weighed more than 1,000 pounds? Generally speaking, Chinese knotweed was different from other medicinal herbs. Most medicinal herbs, no matter how precious they were, would turn into ashes once they reached 10,000 years old, and the spiritual energy within would return to heaven and earth. Only Chinese knotweed was not subject to this restriction. No matter how old it would not return to heaven and earth. But it was precisely because of this characteristic that the Chinese knotweed that Earthcracker found was extremely rare. Even the huge pile of elixirs that the first young master had found did not have it. The first thing Junimo Xie did was to hurriedly store this gigantic thing into the Hongjun Pagoda, as if it was a precious treasure. The Beast Kings were working so hard because of the same thought. Brother-in-law, hurry up and refine the pills. We are all waiting to improve our strength. Once we have strength, we can beat those damn bastards from the Holy Land and avenge our elder sister. June Moxie had 1,000 things to do. After he had finally arranged all the arrays, he immediately put the task of refining the pills on the agenda. Strength was indeed the most important. The Tion Fa forest was undoubtedly very strong, and the mystical beasts were also unusually united. The entire forest was like a piece of iron, and even saints did not dare to enter easily. However, not daring to enter easily did not mean that they absolutely did not dare to enter. There are always accidents. To give a simple example, if the three holy lands outside Tion Fa gathered a group of their strongest experts and joined forces to attack, as long as they didn't advance rashly, they would definitely be able to achieve considerable results. In addition to external threats, there were also internal problems. June Moxie would never forget that in the midst of the Misty Mansion in the Tion Fa forest, there seemed to be an extremely powerful being sealed. The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters. Speaking of the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, June Moxie sometimes felt that the world would be too peaceful if this lunatic didn't exist. Moreover, the people of Misty Mansion could also enter Tion Fa. A very secure fortress did not mean that it was absolutely secure. This was something that needed to be understood, even if he didn't know whether he was a friend or foe. June Moxie still decided to maintain his vigilance. If it wasn't someone that he truly acknowledged, June Moxie would never let his guard down. For the next 2 nights, June Moxie had overdrawn himself a dozen times. He had mass-produced a large number of vitality linkage pills, vitality congregation pills, and heavenly vitality pills. He had refined no less than 2,000 pills of each type. Right now, ever since June Dashao's meridians had transformed into purple spiritual energy, his efficiency in refining pills had increased by more than 2 times. Originally, when refining these 3 great pills, he would only be able to produce a few batches of pills in an entire night. Sometimes there was even a chance of failure. But now, he could produce 3 to 4 batches in an hour, and the success rate had skyrocketed. Originally, he could produce more than 10 pills in a single batch. But now, he could produce at least 50 pills in a single batch. Useless pills? There was no such thing as a useless pill. This allowed June Moxie to truly feel the benefits of this purple aura. Not only was its toughness 10 times greater than the original white aura, but it was also able to coordinate with the flame of primal chaos and the furnace of good fortune in a truly intimate manner. It was as if the 3 of them were originally a family. June Moxie faintly felt that his conjecture was very close to the truth. What June Moxie didn't know was that his conjecture was not close to the truth. In fact, it was the truth. The flame of primal chaos and the furnace of good fortune were originally created from the primordial chaos. They complemented each other and were eternal and indestructible. And the newly formed purple energy in his meridians was the parent of the flame of primal chaos and the furnace of good fortune. The primal chaos purple energy. If the primal chaos purple energy was used to activate the flame of primal chaos and the furnace of good fortune, there would still be accidents, especially when it was used to produce such low-grade trash pills. Even Lord Pangu, who split the heavens and earth apart, would have slammed his head against the wall and died. But then again, the primal chaos purple energy that June Moxie had now was still too weak. So it still couldn't support his endless refining of pills for a long period of time. If he waited until it grew stronger, then it would be truly impressive. But even if the total amount of true qi could not keep up, young Master June was simply too dedicated. Even the most dedicated pill Tao cultivator would not be like this fellow, just grabbing a few types of pills and concocting them like a madman without rest or sleep. It was as if he had not eaten a full meal for 10 years and suddenly came across a free restaurant, swearing not to give up until the other party was poor. What made people even more envious and jealous was that this fellow had an almost inexhaustible supply of elixirs to back him up. Normally, when refining pills, they would stop after refining a few batches. There were no more ingredients, but this fellow was different. Not only did he have the entire Tion Fa forest, he even had the 9 other first young master's inheritance and treasures. Those were all top-grade treasures. Just like that, 2 days and 2 nights passed in darkness. June Moxie's dedicated labor finally came to an end. He stretched his back, and the bones in his body cracked. Only then did he remember to go out for a breath of fresh air. He had originally wanted to let Mei Shuyan cultivate beside him when he was refining pills. But Mei Shuyan had only just reached the first level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. She was far from reaching the 4th level of the Hongjun Pagoda. Jun Dashao had no choice but to give up. But when Jun Moxie came out, he was also shocked. Although Mei Shuyan had yet to break through the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, as she continued to cultivate the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, she absorbed a huge amount of spiritual energy into her body. She had actually leapt to the ranks of a level 7 Xian beast. This made Jun Dashao feel a little unbalanced. Isn't this a little too fast? What kind of person is this? Oh no, what kind of beast is this? This is too much of a beast. I don't think this young master has such a fast progress. It's only been a few days. Jun Dashao had obviously neglected a very important point. Although he was also constantly cultivating to increase his cultivation, when he was in the outside world, the spiritual energy was extremely sparse. And the time he spent in the outside world was obviously much more than the time he spent in the Hongjun Pagoda. But Mei Shuyan was determined not to relax. She directly cultivated in the Hongjun Pagoda. Whether it was eating, drinking, or sleeping, they were all enveloped by the spiritual energy of the Hongjun Pagoda. It would be strange if this speed was not fast. Although Mei Shuyan had the speed of a beast, Jun Dashao was worse than a beast. Seeing that Jun Moxie had come over to her side, Mei Shuyan was naturally very happy. Obviously, she was quite satisfied with the results of her cultivation during this period of time. Although Jun Moxie was still very close to her, and her heart was still somewhat unable to accept it, this time, Mei Shuyan did not purposely avoid Jun Moxie and allowed herself to be hugged in his arms. Because this embrace, it was only after losing it for a while that she truly understood how much she longed for this warm embrace. Only in this embrace would Mei Shuyan feel that no matter what, she would always have someone to rely on. He had walked the path of the strong alone for many years. Although he seemed majestic and stood at the peak, he had never felt a sense of belonging. It was always lonely at the top. However, although he was lonely, although he was cold, he had persevered and walked all the way. At first, she didn't think much of it. It seemed that life was just like this. From the moment she was born, she had started to work hard to become strong. Until the end, she threw her life on the battlefield of the war for seizing the heavens, as if that was her final destination, and her destined fate. Mei Shuyan didn't think much of it. She had long been used to accepting her own fate. Although she didn't feel what happiness was. She had never tasted what happiness was, but ever since this embrace appeared, she knew, truly knew. She knew that the meaning of her life was not only Tion Fa, not only the war for seizing the heavens. So in this world, there was something even more beautiful, something that could make her put down the war for seizing the heavens, and even sacrifice everything, something that she would protect and cherish even if she had to burn everything in an instant. So this was the most precious thing in life. Only with him could her life truly become complete. In the war for seizing the heavens, she could still sacrifice herself, but she would have worries. The war for seizing the heavens, the lives of the world, was once an ideal, or perhaps a goal. But that was not life, nor was it the whole meaning of existence. When there were no such things, when there were no more worries, she only wanted to have a partner that she could rely on for the rest of her life. Watching the sunrise in the morning, facing the night breeze at night, admiring the flowers in spring, facing the thunder in summer, watching the setting moon in autumn, and sharing the ice and snow in winter, or hiding in a house made of snow and ice, sleeping together. Because of each other, even the ice and snow would become gentle and warm. In the instant that she was once again embraced by June Moxie, Mei Shuiyin could clearly feel herself trembling. Her soul was trembling in happiness. Mei Shuiyin could clearly feel the attachment this embrace had towards her, so she didn't care anymore, no matter what worries her. No matter what I become, I will always be his most beautiful Shui Yin, the most beautiful woman, the one he loves the most. Whether it's in my human form or in my original form. Since that's the case, then what do I still care about? Jun Moxie was overjoyed. Being in the Hongjun Pagoda, he could clearly feel that Mei Shuiyin had let go of everything after a great enlightenment. This lass's mental state had a huge breakthrough, and she had actually successfully unlocked her own heart by herself. This really made him overjoyed. Chapter 788. After a long while, Jun Moxie finally said contentedly, Shuiyin, huh? Do you know, ever since you were injured, even though I looked fine on the surface, my heart has never calmed down. I've been worried all along the way. I've been thinking about you. But today's hug has truly made me feel at ease. You little vixen who makes me worry about you. It's really torturous. Mei Shuiyin blinked her big, intelligent eyes and looked at Jun Moxie's face. She continued to shrink her body and snuggle into his embrace. She quietly put her small ears on his chest to catch the familiar sound of his heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. Every sound made her feel incomparably blissful. I can't take it anymore. You little vixens still want to tempt me at this time. I've decided, even if you recover in the future, you must return to your current appearance and let me hug you every once in a while. I like this feeling too much. I'm too happy. Jun Dashao sighed in satisfaction. You still want to do this after you've recovered? How can I face others then? However, it's not a bad thing to fulfill your wish. I just hope that you won't regret it when the time comes. Mei Shuiyin, who was in his embrace, lightly snorted and playfully blinked her eyes, as if deep in thought. Jun Dashao himself didn't know that because of this sentence today, it would bring him great trouble in the future. After the two of them got married, for a period of time, whenever Jun Moxie wanted to be intimate with her, he would always find that at the most crucial moment, when he was about to charge into the battlefield, the alluring beauty in his arms would suddenly turn into a little air. One could imagine, every time that happened, Jun Dashao would want to cry, but no tears would come out. Well, that's a story for another time. Just as Jun Moxie was talking nonsense, suddenly, Mei Shuiyin, who was in his arms, became completely silent. Jun Moxie was greatly surprised. He looked down and saw that Mei Shuiyin's eyes were bright, staring at a point in the air, and her breath was long. At this moment, she actually fell into a transcendent state, similar to enlightenment. Jun Moxie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had no choice but to hug the soft little thing in his arms and act like a statue for a while. After an unknown period of time, Mei Shuiyin suddenly jumped onto the heaven and earth spirit vein that she used to rest and cultivate. Her tiny claws were as swift as the wind, and she waved them around. Dragons and phoenixes danced, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. He had actually written 3 lines of words. However, Jun Moxie could clearly feel that this was not a word. At least, it wasn't just words. It was 3 kinds of profound moves, because the murderous aura on it was extremely strong. Ask, when will the struggle for power stop? Hate, the holy lands are heartless. One wish, the world is peaceful. Ask, when will the storm and war stop? Hate, the heavens have tears. 2 wish, the earth is cleansed, the world is clean. Ask, when will the end of time come? Hate, the world is long. 3 wish, the heavens. This feeling will accompany the cycle of reincarnation. Jun Mo. Xie carefully looked at these 3 sentences and suddenly seemed to understand something. The first line should be referring to the people from the 3 holy lands. Mei Shuiyin had already seen through them and expressed a desire to reorganize the world. And it should be a move that covered a wide area. Every stroke represented the position of the next move. Moreover, it could change back and forth from beginning to end, and its power was extremely impressive. The second line was talking about the war for seizing the heavens. So, this was a wish and also a determination to cleanse the world and return it to a peaceful world. At the same time, this was also a move. As for the third line, it was actually love, and the target seemed to be himself. And the emotions were strong. Every stroke was full and smooth, revealing a kind of determination that would not change in future generations. Make a wish to the heavens. This feeling will accompany the cycle of reincarnation. Using the cycle of reincarnation to express her sincere feelings. The so-called cycle of reincarnation also represented a killer move. A killer move with the greatest power. An ultimate move that no one in the world would be able to avoid. This last was indeed an overlord of a generation. To suddenly comprehend at this moment. On top of that, he had created 3 peerless techniques with boundless power, and the one that attracted Jun Dashao's eyes the most, love accompanies reincarnation, was actually the most powerful of the 3 moves. This meant that in her heart, Jun Moxie was the most important. Whether it was the 3 holy lands or the war for seizing the heavens, they were all important, but it also depended on who they were compared to. Pride. Amazing. Really amazing. How sharp was Jun Moxie's eyes? Naturally, he could see the power of these 3 moves with a single look. But the complexity of it was also unimaginable. Looks like all these years, the responsibility of the 3 holy lands and the war for seizing the heavens had pressured Mei Shuiyin to such an extent. Otherwise, she would never have been able to create such an earth-shattering move. Jun Moxie could also see that these 3 moves were still in their early stages. No one would have thought that in this place, with only the 2 of them as witnesses, after Mei Shuiyin broke through the shackles of her soul, she had a flash of inspiration and created the 3 ultimate techniques that would later dominate the world. 3 questions to the heavens. Jun Moxie did not disturb her, but quietly left the Hongjun Pagoda, because after writing these 3 lines of words, Mei Shuiyin once again fell into a strange state of detachment. Her eyes stared at these 3 lines of words, and she entered a long period of contemplation. She was perfecting these 3 moves. The moves that she created were the most suitable for her. This was the first time in many years that Mei Shuiyin had created her own move. At such a time, she must not be disturbed. Once she was disturbed, all her previous efforts would be wasted. Jun Moxie was very clear about this. So, he chose to disappear silently. Because his existence, even if it was just a glimpse of a shadow, was enough to affect the success or failure of Mei Shuiyin's move. How could it be easy to create a move? The continent's Xian techniques had been passed down since the 9 Nether First Young Master's time. It had been at least 10,000 years. More than 10,000 years. How many moves had been tempered over and over again? Whether it was imitating beasts or birds, whether it was imitating mountains or waterfalls or the boundless sea of clouds, wind, snow, and moon, every move had to go through countless modifications. Everything that could be used had basically been used to its fullest extent. The space left for the later generations to think was also relatively less and less. Therefore, those who were able to create their own moves on this basis were all grandmasters of their generation. Shockingly talented people. And Mei Shuiyin's cultivation was completely destroyed, and she had to start all over again. Moreover, she practiced a special martial art that was completely different from her past. It was equivalent to abandoning her past for many years. But at this time, she was able to let go of all the shackles in her heart. With emotions as the foundation, she created a move that completely belonged to her. And from this moment onwards, although Mei Shuiyin's cultivation was only at the 7th level of a Xian beast, she truly possessed the qualifications that were not inferior to the ancestors of the 3 holy lands. Self-created martial art. At this moment, Mei Shuiyin did not even care about her image and fell into deep thought. As for Jun Moxie, he did not have any other thoughts. He was not jealous, nor did he compare. The only thing he had was a heart full of pride, because the person who has such achievements is my woman, is my wife. Mei Shuiyan's enlightenment took a full 3 days. And in these 3 days, Jun Moxie did not even dare to disturb her when she was delivering food and water. When he was refining the pills, he directly entered the 4th level of the Hongjun Pagoda and then directly teleported out from the 4th level. Outside, the Tianfa forest was in a state of jubilation, because Jun Moxie had already released the news that all the 9th level Xian beasts who did not eat the pills last time would all have a share this time. As soon as this earth-shattering news spread out, the Beast Kings rushed over as fast as they could, as if they were chasing the wind and lightning. Along the way, they roared and called out to their own 9th level Xian beasts. Hurry up! There's great news. There's that good pill from last time. With that pill, I can speed up my progress and shorten my cultivation time. I'm one step closer to my new home. I need to hurry up and get it. In an instant, everyone, whether flying in the sky or running on the ground, rushed over hurriedly. There was a continuous sound of big blockheads crashing into the trees, then getting up from the ground and sprinting away in a daze, looking at the huge black mass in front of them. Then looking at the sky that was covering the sun and the sky that was descending, there was still more flying in the distance, and the sound of thousands of soldiers and horses running in the forest. All of their eyes were red, and all of them were full of desire. Jun Dashao suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. How many are there? An army of 1,000,000? Didn't Shui Yin say previously that there were less than 20,000 9th level Xian beasts in the Tianfa forest? Why did so many suddenly appear now? Not to mention that there were still those who were far away and had not received the news. Who knew how many were there? The ones here were only the ones who were close by. A very small portion, but from the looks of it, this extremely small portion was at least more than 200,000. Shui Yin, Shui Yin, your casual words have caused me to suffer. This is the 20,000 that you were talking about? How many 20,000 would that be? What Jun Moxie did not know was that when he announced the news just now, he had left out a word. Peak. This word was too important. It was definitely the difference between heaven and hell. Mei Shuyan had said that there were more than 20,000 peak 9th level Xian beasts. But this time, Jun Dashao was muddle-headed and said 9th level Xian beasts. The difference between the two was definitely huge. Although 20,000 peak 9th level Xian beasts was not a small number, but in the huge Tianfa forest, this ratio was definitely not a lot. In fact, it was even 1 in 10 million. But 9th level Xian beasts were hundreds of times more than this number. Jun Moxie finally understood why Mei Shuyan had once said that if Tianfa wanted to annihilate the 3 holy lands, or even the entire continent, it would not be too difficult. He also finally understood why even the Saint King and the Holy Emperor did not dare to enter Tianfa directly. Yesterday was Brother Fei Xiang's birthday. I'm sorry to know it's so late, but I'm still here to give my late blessings to my brother. Brother Fei Xiang, I wish you a happy birthday. I hope that every birthday from now on will bring you greater achievements than the year before. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.